All right, we are back in public session. Tonight's meeting did start at 6:30. We moved immediately into private session. It's now 7:35. We're back in public session. Peggy, could you lead us in the flag salute? Thank you. Announcements. Anything on your end, Peggy?
I have two announcements. In reference to athletics, we'd like to commend the Westfield High School boys swimming team, who won the NJSIAA sectional championship, defeating Hillsborough High School on February 12th. Also, a reminder that all schools are closed in Westfield from April 2nd to April 10th for our spring break, and we wish everybody an enjoyable and hopefully warm, no snow spring break.
Okay, Roosevelt Intermediate School will present Shrek the Musical on March 20th and 21st at 7:30 and March 22nd at 2 p.m. Shrek the Musical is more than a feel-good children's story. It digs deep into our inner self to find the meaning of true beauty. Tickets are $10. For tickets and more information, visit /RIS.westfieldnjk12.org. And I also just wanted to mention, I don't know if anyone else has it in their notes, that the High School Musical Edison put on last week, I believe. Yes. Phenomenal. I don't believe we made comment about it, but it was terrific. We did? Okay, I wasn't sure. Sorry, I didn't hear.
McKinley school nurse Valerie Williams was officially recognized by the Westfield Rescue Squad in February for her quick actions in helping a member of the school staff who was suffering from an apparent heart attack. We'd also like to recognize Mr. Joseph Hahn, head custodian, for his assistance. Thank you to these skilled and compassionate staff members for their quick action.
Anything you're in?
Yes. We would like to congratulate Jasper Lemberg, 8th grader at Roosevelt Intermediate School, who will be representing Westfield in New Jersey State Geographic B on Friday, March 27th. This will mark the third consecutive year in which Jason has qualified, I think it should be Jasper. Jasper has qualified for the state competition to be held at Rowan University. Well done, and good luck on the 27th.
Congratulations to 5 Edison Intermediate students who were chosen to perform in the 2015 Region 2 String Orchestra. Dylan McCann on viola, Morgan Eng on violin, Aprina Wang on French horn, Brooke Walden on flute, and Austin Chen on trumpet. We'd like to congratulate 2 students from Roosevelt who were selected to perform in the Region 2 Symphonic Band, Alex Cha from grade 6 clarinet, and Michael Charlton, grade 8 percussion. Congratulations.
I have 2 announcements this evening. The first is regarding the Optimist Club of Westfield's 18th Annual Intermediate School Outstanding Teacher Award. This award recognizes the importance of teaching in the intermediate grades. One award is given for a teacher in each of Edison and Roosevelt Intermediate School. Criteria for the award will be found on information on our website and referred to at the Optimist Club website. The nomination deadline is Tuesday, April 21st, so you have at least a month to get those nominations in. And Westfield High School announcement, congratulations to junior Isabella Gelfand, who delivered a speech on Sunday, March 2nd at Times Square, where the United Nations Women March for Gender Equality concluded. Isabella's speech included her dreams for eliminating violence against girls. Representing girls from around the world, she was once again selected as a delegate on behalf of Girls Learn International to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women and was invited to speak on various panels. Congratulations one more time to Isabel Gelfand. We look forward to her continuing involvement in these worthy activities.
I have a fine arts announcement. Congratulations to our Westfield High School students who were accepted to the 2015 Central Jersey Music Educators Region 2 Ensemble. Following an audition process where hundreds of students auditioned, the following Westfield High School students were selected and performed at the New Jersey Music Educators Association Conference held in New Brunswick in February. They include, for Region 2 Orchestra, Dale Byert for trumpet, Soo-Min Chung for violin, and Amy Liang for cello. The Region 2 Symphonic Band, Michael Haig on clarinet, Alistair Capadia on bassoon, and Albert Chen on baritone sax. Albert was also accepted to the All-State Symphonic Band as one of 3 baritone saxes in the state selected this year. Also, congratulations to the following Westfield High School students who were chosen from over 1,000 students who auditioned to be accepted to the 2015 Region 2 Mixed and Women's Choruses. They performed on February 1st at Monroe High School. The mixed chorus was represented by Noah Bram, Catherine Moore, Abby Rothenberg, Laura Serace, and Max Wazalewski. Sorry, Max. In women's chorus, Lauren Brumfeld, Allison Jaruzelski, and Melanie Snyder. Can I not get this one next week? Sorry about that, guys. But congratulations to all of you on these impressive performances.
Thank you. All right. The next Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, April 14th. We've scheduled a workshop for that date. On April 28th, we'll hold a regular meeting, at which time we'll have a public hearing on the budget, and we'll adopt the final budget for 2015-2016. With that, I would recognize the public for agenda items only. If you have comments on field lighting, you're welcome to make them now or at the time of our facilities presentation when this topic will be covered. Anyone speaking from the podium, please get close to the microphone so we can avoid feedback that's created by having to lower and raise the volume so that we can all hear what's being said. If anybody would like to speak or comment, please go to the podium. All right, seeing no one go to the podium. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. If you're speaking, please state your name and address before you begin.
My name is Paul Stierhoff. I'm at 827 Grandview Avenue. And I'm going to try to make a somewhat impartial, I think, appeal to the board tonight. I've had the benefit of being a coach in both the lacrosse program and the soccer program, excuse me. I'm not in the affected area by the lights. Grandview Avenue is down a little bit further away off of Grove Street. As I see this, it's a very difficult situation because there is not enough field space in this town. It impacts a number of children. I've been impacted by it by myself. I have children who have played in the Ultimate Frisbee Club in town. Excuse me. The Ultimate Frisbee Club has basically no access to field space, and when they have to play in games, they have to travel all the way down to Trenton, basically. So I understand the impact that this has. That said, I also can feel for the homeowners. The parents whose children want to play soccer or want to play lacrosse are impacted for maybe 2 or 3 years, where they have to travel maybe to further fields, where they have to live with the inconvenience of the crammed space. Westfield has a problem here. There's no doubt about it. But if we start putting lights up on Kaler Stadium, we're talking about a situation where the impacted homeowners now are going to have to live with this potentially for 20 or 30 years. Because even though this is a test program, a pilot program, that's typically just the first step. If it works, if they can get that through, then the next step is to try to get permanent lighting onto Kaler. If you've ever seen the lights that go up for field use, they are blinding, which means that the impacted homeowners, while they may want to sit outside on a nice spring evening, are now in the situation where they've got these blaring lights shining in their eyes. It's uncomfortable. You end up having to go into your house, pull your blinds, just so you can even watch your TV. They are very intrusive. So I think we have to weigh here the benefits versus the costs. you have the children and the parents who want their children to be able to play these sports. It would definitely be a convenience for them, there's no doubt about it. But there are other organizations that are impacted who have to travel. If the parents have to travel for 2 or 3 years so that their children can continue to play in a sport, that is their decision. And that is something that if their children want to play in that sport, they can make the decision, yes, we're willing to make that sacrifice so that our children can have use or can continue to play this sport. On the other hand, the homeowners who live in that area, if these lights go in, it's not something that they have a choice about. It's not something that they get to walk away from. It's not something that is just for a temporary period of time ultimately. So it's not like they're going to be having to put out a sacrifice for 2 or 3 years. It's something if they want to stay in Westfield and stay in that home, it could ultimately impact them for 20 or 30 years. And I think we have to weigh what's fair. Who should be paying the price here? Should it be the parents and the children who ultimately want to play these sports and it would be for a limited period of time? Or should it be the homeowners who ultimately are paying for something that they don't even really necessarily get to appreciate, and it could be for an extended period of time? So I think when making this decision, I think you need to weigh very heavily on the long-term impact it can have on the homeowners and the limited term impact it could have on the families who have to travel. I've had to travel myself. I understand it's frustrating. I'd love to have more field space in town. I think as a town we should try to find more field space because there may be some places we can put more in, but that's a longer-term project. For right now, I don't think it's fair to be placing these homeowners in that situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public at this time? All right, seeing no one come to the podium, then we will move to the superintendent's report.
And we actually have a two-part presentation tonight. The first part focuses on the technology and plans for the future in technology, and the second one provides an overview of the the proposed budget for next year. So to start the first part, which is focused on technology, I will first turn this over to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Mr. Paul Pinero.
Hello, good evening. So I guess it was about 3 years ago, almost this time of the season, where we first rolled out an initiative that we called Walls to Windows. We work very closely, of course, with the Board of Education on all our major initiatives, but this was a big one. It included a lot of investment. It included a lot of investigation, an understanding of what the world is like, not just in classrooms and buildings. So we had an excellent committee of people that worked very closely together and included members on the board now and some who've actually moved on. I mean, just resigning and retiring from the board, not, somewhere else. But so at any rate, it's something that I think we're all very proud of, and being a part of that myself, I did want to say that. So at any rate, Walls to Windows began 3 years ago, February. And tonight we're just going to do a brief presentation talking a little bit about where we were, where we are, and where we're headed. And that ties into tonight's budget presentation as well. And so I guess that casts me as the ghost of instructional technology past. I did steal that from Dr. Dolan. So we'll get started with that. So initially, our guiding philosophy, as all philosophy should be in our schools, well, safety first and then instruction and preparing our students for the future. So our guiding philosophy then was today's education system faces irrelevance unless we bridge the gap between how students live and how they learn. That was taken from the Partnership for 21st Century Skills, which is a significant partnership organization internationally that studies what our students need to be able to do problem-solving wise in the world and in college and careers. So we thought that was a good guiding philosophy. Yeah, so we launched our initiative, and this graphic does a nice job of, I'll just explain it briefly, but this was also like our guiding visual. So what you see is the instructional pieces are rotating, so there's 3 of those satelliting, rotating around the concrete infrastructure to deliver the instruction that we wanted to upgrade and improve for our students. When we started out, like traditionally, a lot of classrooms, how a lot of classrooms looked back then and prior to that, there were, maybe a projector in the room with a, one computer, and the teacher would present things on the front board. If there were computers in the room, students might share them, and go out on the internet, find information. So it was quicker access to information that way. We wanted to bring it more towards an authentic learning experience where students would collaborate together in a fashion that we see people today in the workforce working and in colleges as well. So the top bubble satellite was all about updating our instruction and providing teachers with resources on how to teach in that 21st century learning environment. Down in the lower right, we had personnel as an important ingredient to this effort. And on the left, there was policy. So we would have to upgrade our policies or update them, revise them to reflect an environment that we hadn't yet established. So our next slide will show us more specifically what each of those became, each of those satellites. So the top one I alluded to already was a learning environment that was more like the world that we live in today as far as colleges and careers are concerned. In the lower right, you'll see that we have instructional technology coaches. So a big part of this was personnel. Biggest mistake you can make in a large initiative that invests a lot of time and money is to think that you can build it and they will come. That's sort of, that's the worst thing you can do with any kind of technology initiative, as an example. So we didn't do that, and you'll see 2 of the linchpins of this professional development initiative, which is connected to the whole ball of wax. And without them, I don't think we would have, I know we wouldn't have in any way leveraged all of the investment and hard work that we've done. So in addition to that, you'll see on the left, the lower satellite says bring your own device. Well, that's an example of policy that we needed to upgrade. For example, prior to having a wireless infrastructure available for students and teachers, for that matter, to bring in their own devices, we had to have policy that would dictate, well, what does it mean if X happens or if Y happens? And if a device is stolen or broken, or if it's used improperly. And then also some policy referred to students as well. So I was making a joke on teachers doing that. At any rate, all around in the center of this is the infrastructure and the delivery of it. So if you don't have the ability to deliver the wireless, to have the devices, then all the rest can't function. We can't upgrade without that. So Brian, later on, our Chief Technology Officer, will go through a little bit of that evolution and talk to you about the current budget request from technology that Dana will then cover a little later on. Okay. So this is just a shorthand of what we mean by then, now, and in the future. So web, the web, the internet. A few years back, that just meant everything that we thought it meant. You go online, you can do some research, you can collect information, you can share it in class. At that point, we would refer to Web 1.0 as students as consumers of information, or all of us really as consumers of information. Then with the explosion of social media and any kind of app that actually enables the world to get together and learn together remotely 24/7, that starts to change the way people learn and the environments and when they learn. When that happens, you create this environment that's very similar to where our young people grow up. They live in a digital environment, and classes and learning should reflect that as well. So in the Web 2.0 world, which is where we're at today, you would see students have opportunities to do some higher order thinking, development of their higher order thinking. Things like synthesizing, analyzing, and critiquing. Those are high-level skills, and if you're problem solving or handling projects collaboratively with your peers in class, you're going to be able to do those things better than if you were in a traditional environment. So with all of these tools available for collaboration and extending outside of the classroom, you know, taking the walls and turning them into windows, that would be the Web 2.0 environment that we were striving to reach. When you see our master technology teachers in a few minutes discuss what some of that looks like, you'll start to get a peek of what I imagine people will start calling Web 3.0 to be. From there, it just could, it could be anybody's guess. Oh, okay, so this is sort of I'm proud of this, we all are. So in 2012, our planned outcomes were these. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. One was to prepare the students to excel in the world, and we've talked, you know, I've referred to how that would happen a couple of times. How they learn in life, so authentic environments for them. Also assessment, one simple thing like allowing students to take out their cell phones and answer a poll, and the teacher just says, everybody, you know, log in and say, you know, what you think the answer to this is, or give some feedback to that. You instantly, as a teacher, know what the student's understanding might be, and it doesn't have to even be aligned with a certain student's name. It can just be anonymous. It doesn't really matter. It can be anything. So you find out within seconds that half of the class doesn't quite understand that, and nobody had to raise their hand or anything like that. But that's only like one aspect of it. But that kind of real-time assessment is something that we can do if there are devices in students' hands, and teachers for that matter. Communication, we were also able to expand our communication as a district, as a school district, into the community. The last one, be an exemplar district. That was a bold statement. We didn't say that after it happened. We were challenged by our Board of Education to establish Westfield as not being on the verge of the cutting edge or trying to reach the cutting edge, but to actually be on the, you know, beyond that. I think they call it the bleeding edge sometimes. So that was our goal, to do things and to get to a point where we were a model as opposed to trying to play catch up, which is really where we were at. So these are just 3 pictures of how we were, and I'm really proud of the folks that took us there, how we were able to achieve some of that. Within, you know, within a year of launching the initiative, the job description that we came up with and the idea that we came up with, in fact, Dr. Dolan thought that we would have the 2 coaches, master technology teachers, for grade spans K through 5 and then 6 through 12, really facilitate full-time in classrooms the training and the professional development for all of our teachers, and again, you know, right in the classroom, so they could help them during their lunch hours, prep periods, and after school. There was a lot of after-school workshops that the master technology teachers were able to conduct for the teachers, and probably the most dynamic thing that they were able to do is get right in the classroom, model in the classroom for the teacher, and then maybe even observe the teacher, plan with the teacher, design lessons with the teacher, all of that. And that very quickly got the ball rolling. The upper left picture is a picture of Janine Gotko with Dr. Dolan meeting with Commissioner, at that time it was, I blocked it.
Commissioner Surf.
Right, Surf. So that's Commissioner Surf on the right. So Janine was named by the National School Boards Association one of the 20 teachers to watch nationally, and that was based on our model and how well executed it was, and that was really something special. So they flew her out to San Diego for that, and then she appeared in Trenton for that, and actually just a week ago they asked her to go to Atlanta to join like recent alumni, but we told her she had work to do here with other things, so sorry, Janine, maybe next year. On the right-hand side, we had students now, so Adam Peasy is our grades 6 through 12 master technology teacher, and he'll be speaking to you in a bit and show you some exciting things about what folks are doing at those grade levels. But students and teachers that he has been working with were recognized by the state for some of their initiatives, and they were brought down to Trenton as a model. In fact, the picture on the bottom, it's a little harder to make out, shows Ivo Popov and Takesha Saylor, and they're the Chief Innovation Officer and his assistant in the Trenton offices. And they referred, and that's Mr. Renwick there from the high school, to the high school and their efforts as a model for technology. And that happened last year, so that was a couple years in. And at the middle of all that were the pilot programs that Adam Peasy was guiding large groups of teachers through, and those pilots keep growing. It's becoming really the standard within the high school itself. And so Adam will show you a lot of what they're doing. So that's some pretty good recognition. Some of that was covered by District Administrator, which is a national magazine that we all read, and so that actually covered Mr. Walker some years ago when he first got here. So a lot of great stuff going on. We have a lot of talented people, including the students and the teachers, obviously, and then all the support from the board, and we've come a long way. So with all of that said, I am really pleased and honored to introduce, I guess these are the ghosts of instructional present and future, our Master Tech teachers, and Janine Gotko is going to talk to you first about the elementary grade spans.
I think Paul did a really great job talking about where we were with the elementary level and also the middle and high school level, obviously, dating way back to, I hate to say it, about 15 or 16 years ago when I started in the district and had one computer in my classroom that didn't really get a lot of usage. We didn't even have email back then. Seems like a lifetime ago. 5 years ago, perhaps right before the initiative came out, I was a 5th grade teacher at Franklin School. The only wireless available to us as elementary teachers was one laptop cart that we were sharing among 600 students in our building, and that was where the wireless router was for the entire school at that point. We were all hardwired. And the greatest innovation we really had, besides our wonderful teachers and the things that they were trying to do with technology, was maybe a smart board or an interactive whiteboard of some sort where we were projecting our lessons, and maybe students were coming up every now and then to work with the interactive whiteboard. So when the initiative came in 2012, we took a huge leap forward. We had iPad carts for all of our elementary schools, wireless access in all of our elementary schools began, and we also had more laptop carts to share amongst the teachers and the students. But obviously, as Paul mentioned, putting the master technology teachers into effect, I think made a really important, what's the word I'm looking for? Step worth, to help our teachers, because they really needed the professional development that we did. We went into the classrooms, like Paul said, we did a lot of coaching, we did a lot of modeling, and we gave them the resources that were out there. As you all know with technology, it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and to keep on top of it, our teachers needed that help, and they needed to know how they could best use it with their students. So Brian, if you could go to the next screen. So just to share with you now where we are in the elementary levels, as opposed to just maybe using a laptop to do some word processing or an interactive whiteboard to maybe show a PowerPoint. Some of the things we've been doing, obviously the iPads and the laptop carts have made a huge help with getting technology to our students. Google Apps for Education, we started this year with our upper elementary students, so then now they're working in a cloud-based system where they're collaborating with other students in their classes. Some are even collaborating across the district, with other 5th graders. We brought Skype, if you've used Skype before, to talk to your relatives or talk to someone else. We're now doing it in classrooms. So some of our 4th graders, you'll see in the video in a second, are going to be talking to regions in the United States. So they make Skype calls. It's called Mystery Skype. It's a lot of fun. They call another classroom. They don't know where they're calling, and they have to use their geography skills to kind of play 20 questions and kind of figure out where each classroom is located. And then the great thing is that they can then talk with those students and have a conversation about what life is like in their city and their region. So one of the ones you'll see in the video in just a second is in Kansas City. So they had a great time talking about, well, what do you do? What is, your city like? What do you do after school? So it's a great way to bring the outside in. With online learning, we have a lot of subscription services that we work with for our social studies, our math, and all of our subjects that our students use on the iPads and laptop carts. We've been working the last couple years with coding. Code.org does Hour of Code, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, where our students are learning, even at a 1st grade level, about how to do software coding and different things, activities like that. On the right-hand side, virtual field trips where they get to go to museums on other sides of the world that they can see art exhibits and things like that. We had a 5th grade teacher who's working with that. And all the way down to what I now call basic things, digital citizenship for the elementary kids. How do we learn online? What are our responsibilities? Podcasting. We have kindergartners who are making podcasts of the writing that they're doing. And they're being able to share it with their family and their relatives and other students, which is great. research and publishing like we've done before, and then obviously computer basics, which our elementary students still need. So Brian's going to go to our video, which we put together at the elementary level, and it just kind of gets you to see what's in our classrooms. So this is where we kind of started with those interactive whiteboards. This is one of our online subscriptions that our kids are working with. So they work together, they solve problems, it's fun for them. It's obviously something they love doing. Another one of our subscription services is an online reading platform where they can work with their reading program and then they can work with books that are at their level. They can do this on their iPads in school, they can monitor their progress, the teacher can monitor their progress, and they can also do this at home, which is great. When we're using our iPads, there's lots of different apps we use. Educreations has been one that a lot of our teachers, especially at the lower elementary, have really bought into, and the kids love it. They're able to record themselves typing, drawing, and then obviously, like you see here, they're reading their work, and they're making a, an audio file so that they can hear themselves reading their work back. At our upper elementary, Evernote and a few other apps are being used as well to do research, to share ideas with each other, to work collaboratively on their written pieces, and to get real-time feedback from their teachers, which is great. And then, like I mentioned before, Google Apps is where we're really going with our students at our upper elementary level. So these students are actually, even though they seem to be working individually, they were working together through the use of the online platform. And this is our Skype project that I spoke to you about earlier. So all the kids are actively engaged, they're communicating with each other and with people all over the world. Our kindergartners there were speaking to someone in London and learning about what life was like in London, which was exciting. And that the great thing about is improving our Wi-Fi and doing all these things is we can take our learning anywhere. So outside, inside the classroom, and if you saw in that first video, out into space where they were learning about different planets, which is exciting for them. So obviously, where do we want to go with our elementary schools? Seems like everything is wonderful and we've come a long way, but really at an elementary level, what we still need to see happen over the next couple years is our wireless system really needs to be upgraded, because even though we can get on successfully, we're not successful all the time. We still have some outages that we deal with, not on a major level, but like if we're all trying to get onto the same app sometimes, we can't all do it at the same time. Or if we have a bunch of classes that have a bunch of different devices, the wireless is not really what it needs to be at an elementary level to harness and get the power of what we want to do. Continued access to those subscription services to support our online learning. BrainPop is huge at our elementary level. We have a point at the year where we have to renew the subscription, and sometimes we have a 1-day lag in renewing our subscription. Our teachers don't like that. Our students lose their minds because it's one of their favorite ways to learn. So all of these, including our Everyday Math Online that supports our math curriculum, our social studies program has an online support program. It's really great because the kids can continue their learning not only in school but at home and in a way that they really enjoy doing that. And then obviously continuing the professional development like Paul mentioned. It's great to give all these things to our teachers, but if there's not a way to support that and to help them facilitate the usage of that, it's not going to get used the way we really want it to be used in our district. And finally, for our elementary level, it'd be great with more devices. A BYOD isn't really, ideal for an elementary level. They really, even though some of them do have phones and things like that, they don't have enough devices of their own to bring in. So the more we can get in their hands and using and helping the teachers to use, the better I think it will be for our program. That's it for elementary. Adam Peasy is going to come up and he's going to speak to you about what's going on at the middle and high school.
Okay, so my name's Adam Peasy. I'm the master technology teacher for the high school and the 2 middle schools. A lot of what I'll kind of review here, Paul has gone over a little bit, and Janine. So this is just the perfect picture of where we were at the high school literally last year. 2013-14 school year. What this represents to me is that, you know, teachers were willing and eager to embrace instructional technology. However, our wireless infrastructure just wasn't ready. So let me just draw that picture out, or just kind of get you into that world for a second. You would have teachers designing lessons, getting excited. They would start thinking about how they're going to, you know, rope their kids in with maybe some application or some website, or even as simple as like playing a YouTube video. They'd be there, the 28 kids would be in front of them. They would go to hit play, and you would see that. It would be loading, there would be outages, not all the time, as Janine said, but frequently enough where the teachers began to lose a little faith. However, we addressed it. And Brian will go to the next slide. Westfield High School is now very strong when it comes to our wireless connectivity. We have upgraded. Brian's going to go over all the technical sort of upgrades, but we brought in access points. We beefed up our servers. There is a very strong, to put it in very simple terms, signal at the high school. So what does that actually lead us to? And that'll be our next slide. This is how Westfield High School is leveraging the power of wireless today, 2014-15. This has all started this year and is going, obviously we look forward to doing it more next year, but this is exactly what's going on now today, this year. We have some BYOD pilots that are going on. Probably about 20 teachers right now have enrolled their classes where students at the high school are bringing in either smartphones or iPads to take advantage of the wireless signal that Brian has built here at the high school. How does that kind of play out? A lot of teachers will be sitting there designing lessons where, you know, maybe halfway through the lesson, Paul alluded to it, they'll poll their kids, and it's as simple as, all right, take out your cell phones now, and I'm going to go ahead and like sort of query the class. And what's great is that the teachers can feel confident in having those phones taken out, and there's going to be no outage. There's going to be no signal where the kids are like, hey, it's not working. I'm trying to get my cell tower to connect here. That's not working either. None of those stories are happening. The Westfield High School is pretty much fully equipped to kind of like move into this digital realm of teaching and learning. Phenomenal stuff. I have podcasting up there. I chose that picture for a reason. That happened last week. And that is a picture that kind of speaks to Paul's comments about walls to windows. There's a humanities class in Westfield High School, 9th graders, and the humanities teachers came to me and said, how do we take advantage of your wireless? I want to start getting the kids in motion while they're learning. So what we did is we created a podcast, which was a walking tour of the play of Othello, where we designed it where the kids would be moving around Westfield High School outside of their classrooms within the building itself, obviously, and going to different stations of learning throughout the high school. This is just a picture of Paul Robeson, right out, actually down this hallway right here. And the kids, this was their first stop on this walking tour, like a New York City walking tour, where they're listening to audio via their iPads as we sent them on their way. So we created, using GarageBand, we created this audio walking tour. We posted it to our website. And then we sat there, we gathered the kids, we had like a staging area, we crossed our fingers, they opened up their iPads, they hit play, and they began to walk around Westfield High School. And we were, obviously very excited that our infrastructure could support such a learning activity. Great stuff. Again, different ways of teaching and learning that are being harnessed by what we have here as far as the power of the infrastructure of Westfield High School. Janine's mentioned it, we are a Google Apps for Education district, 6 through 12. And we got some 5th grade pilots going on as well. That's basically your basic cloud-based computing. So just to throw the example out there, a student can go ahead, even on their cell phones, they can start typing their papers right there on their cell phones. They can share it with their teachers for feedback. They can go home that night, the students can grab it there. The teachers could literally, from their own home, give the kid feedback right there and then dynamically in real time. So just one of the programs we have here. Digital storytelling, I had a teacher today, English teacher, she's doing Death of a Salesman in her classroom, just kind of giving you some examples of how we're leveraging this power. Her kids are making 2 to 3 minute films where they're not just kind of retelling Death of a Salesman, but they're saying, hey, what's the point of view that Willie Loman would take in that story? There they are shooting with their iPads, taking that footage, moving it onto the internet, and then moving that footage onto the internet, onto a digital editor where they're going ahead and making like almost like a feature film. Again, not possible without this strong architecture that we have here. Blogging and online discussions, that's been happening. That happened even before we had the upgrade, so we'll continue to do that. And Paul had mentioned it. We started this year a digital ambassador program. We created a digital learning center up in the library. It's sort of like an annex of the library, where I have sort of quote unquote hired about 6 students from Westfield, almost in the vein of like a Genius Bar, but more on the side of instructional technology. So they're not necessarily fixing computers, but they're sort of the voice of the student as with respect to instructional technology. So they're assisting me in professional development. They are researching applications that the teachers can use in their classrooms. They're sort of sometimes the guinea pigs of how something would work in a classroom. So I'll put them through tests as far as this application or that application. And it's been great. And Paul had mentioned, they had invited us to a conference in New Jersey to sort of highlight our program. Our kids brought podcasting equipment there. We literally held a radio show while we were there. That was the picture. And then we broadcasted it out on our website. So lots of great stuff, and a lot of it is from the backbone of having that infrastructure. And this is just a highlight of what it looks like in real time. I think we would all agree that technology has the potential to transform the way we teach and learn here in Westfield. With that, so many questions do arise. What type of technological infrastructure needs to be put in place? What does this new model of teaching and learning actually look like? And how do we as students, teachers, and administrators make it a reality?
From a technological standpoint, the District of Westfield has made some major improvements. We have updated our wireless infrastructure at the high school with server upgrades and wireless access points, and invested in more mobile labs. We rolled out a digital learning management system for all teachers, students, and parents. And Westfield has signed on with Google Apps for Education, allowing our teachers to run a cloud-based environment.
So in many parts of the district, the technological foundation has been put into place. And now the question is, what do we build on top of it? It may make some sense to ask some students what they see as the promise of technology here in Westfield.
Love the opportunity to take my notes and my resources and share them with my classmates in real time.
I'd like to be able to make engaging presentations with video and audio that make the subject come alive.
I would like the opportunity to be able to bring my own device so that it could replace the 5 binders that I have in my bag.
I'd like to be able to relate my education to what I'm seeing and hearing in the outside world.
I would like to have the opportunity to connect with native French students through a Google Hangout during my French class.
I'd like the opportunity to explore current events through social media and Twitter in order to connect what I'm learning in school to the current world.
I'd like to be able to jump into the content we're learning in class in a way that's meaningful to me.
So it's pretty clear that students are ready and eager to embrace this new form of active learning that leverages the power of technology. What's equally clear is that when their curiosities and their interests are piqued, real learning takes place. Here's what it can look like. Snapshot of what's taking place in the district as far as the high school. So here's the picture. It's kind of a follow-up photo. That's Edison, as you can all tell, I think, from the distance there, and Roosevelt. They're in the same exact situation as they were in 2013-14 for Westfield High School. They absolutely have a wireless connection there, and they're absolutely leveraging technology. However, it's not optimal. And in order to make it optimal, that's why we're here. We'd love to see the same places we took Westfield High School with respect to the infrastructure. We would love to take Roosevelt and Edison, as Janine would love to do at the elementaries as well. Instructional technology goals going forward. From my end, I already said it, Roosevelt EIS, infrastructure-wise, we'd love to see that. One of the goals, and Brian and I have spoken about it, Paul and I have spoken about it, we would love to fully adopt this idea of bring your own device. I think Westfield's ready for it. I think a lot of the kids do have their own devices, obviously some things we need to discuss, but would love to see that grow from a pilot program to full implementation. I've always entertained the idea of having some one-to-one cohorts, meaning designated computers or laptops or iPads for particular teachers in particular subject areas. I'm not saying full scale, but that's something we should definitely be at least looking at. I've spoken to some people about this. Digital learning centers at both middle schools, I think that would be a great idea to kind of spread what we've done at the high school and maybe create a model for what that can be done at Roosevelt and Edison. And a lot of this stuff is what Paul has been opened up with. Janine and I are kind of tasked with creating this new classroom and in any sort of definition that we all kind of think about with respect to technology. Whether it's teachers flipping their instruction by creating videos that the students watch at home and come in and do activities within the class, kids creating student digital portfolios, so instead of having a Scantron sheet, a multiple choice test, or even an essay, there's other ways that we can sort of demonstrate the kids' work outside of those traditional methods. Project-based learning, authentic-based learning. I mentioned this last year in the meeting. The technology that we're bringing in allows teachers and students to really bring home this idea of project-based learning and authentic learning. It was around before, it was around 20 years ago, but the technology has sort of just upped the game, and it's just, there's so many things you can do with the tech to make it authentic. Just a quick example from an authentic standpoint. Kids would read about the Vietnam War in their textbook. Well, now with the technology, they could literally have an interview, a live interview with a Vietnam vet over Skype or over a Google Hangout tomorrow, literally. And I'll always echo this, what Janine said, none of this is possible without strong professional development and follow-up. We can have all the tech in the world and all the devices, but the teachers they need the support, they need the follow-up from us, and that's something that we would obviously make as a goal going forward. But thank you for your time, I appreciate you listening.
And I think now we're going to have our Chief Technology Officer, Brian Auker, who's going to talk about that aspect of technology.
So I guess we had the ghost of Christmas past, and we had presents, so I guess I'm of yet to come. And I don't like that because I should be here in a black robe and have a sickle in my hand, so that's not too good. But I'll try to make this entertaining anyway. What I have to present to you this evening is to, again, touch on and give you a little bit more of the technical background very briefly, because I know we're already, I think, over time, but to very briefly give you an update of what we have done, a little bit more of that tech, what's to come, and where we project the school district going. And of course, as you all know with technology, it is extremely difficult to project what's coming. There are think tanks out there with individuals that get paid a lot of money to try to figure out what is the next best thing. Google employs people, and HP employs people, and Apple employ people to sit around and do nothing but that. So it's a little more difficult in our hands to try to come up with that, but we do the best we can, and with the committees that we have involved, we do have a lot of great ideas and innovative ideas that we have to move the district forward. So you heard from both Adam and Janine, or especially Adam, when he talked about the new infrastructure that was installed here at the high school. So I'll touch on that very briefly. To give you an idea, the current networking infrastructure that we have in all of our schools, that all of our data passes through, that equipment is over 10 years old. It's so old that the manufacturer no longer even supports it. So it wasn't until we upgraded and replaced that equipment here at the high school that we actually had modern networking equipment in place that we could be proud of. And you can see that once we put those devices in place, we have the personnel to take advantage of it. Between the training that they receive from Adam and Janine, the professional development they receive, and then of course what the kids are willing to do with it once they can get their hands on it. They talked about the Wi-Fi in every classroom, and that's what we have here at the high school, and that's what has made such a major impact. Previously, we had a more limited Wi-Fi system. If you just look around this room, let me point out one thing. Last year at this time, you would sit in this room and there was exactly one access point servicing this entire cafeteria. Right now, I can point to the one directly behind me, and I can point to 2, 3, and 4. Each one of these access points has the capability to support, and we know this because we've already tested this, can support more than 150 simultaneous connections. I don't think we'll ever saturate these access points in this room. So one of the reasons why, when Park came along, we weren't worried in any of our schools because we had the infrastructure already in place. We didn't scramble like other school districts to go out and try to put in the equipment that would be required to get it to work. We had the equipment already. So that's one of the reasons why the testing that was done here at the high school, we had more than 120, 150, I believe even some days as high as 175 students taking Park simultaneously without any issues from the network. Few batteries were a little low in some of the laptops, I think, but that was the biggest challenge that they faced here at the high school with Park. So continuing there on this slide, we want to look to improve our network infrastructure at the remaining schools, the intermediates and the elementaries. We want to put Wi-Fi in every classroom. Most of the schools, the other schools outside of the high school, have an access point, not in every classroom, but maybe one in every other classroom. Maybe it's located out in the hallway, and they do not get the strongest signal. That's why when Adam and Janine refer to the spotty service that they get, that's one of the reasons why. The construction of the walls, that has an impact on the radio signal that comes out of the access points. It blocks the signal. So in one classroom, it's completely fine. Across the hall, it's a horrible signal because the access point is out in the hallway and the wall construction type in between blocks that signal. We also talked, they've mentioned before about the support for bring your own device, BYOD. I think that's something that we're all familiar with. We all walk around, we all reach into our pockets, we pull out our smartphones, we have our tablets, we have our laptops, and we're just used to wherever we go, we have access to our data. That's something that's not possible here in the school with the infrastructure that we have. Now at the high school we do. But when I say that I can allow this device to connect to an access point, let's say it's Starbucks, that's great. But I don't think too many of us would trust sending our credit card information over the Wi-Fi network at Starbucks because it's not secure. So when we talk about we want to create a bring your own device network, yes, we could allow students to come in right now and hop on and get on the internet, but it's not secure. And one student that comes in with a laptop that's infected with a virus will quickly spread to all the other students. And that is something that we do not want to do. So in order to properly build a correct network infrastructure to support bring your own device, it does require some more advanced features than what you would think of, because everyone thinks of what they have in their house. Well, I have a little router and I have Wi-Fi in my house. What's the big deal? Why is it so expensive? This is a little bit bigger endeavor that we have here. We certainly want to make sure that those viruses or anything like that that might happen does not propagate over onto the district's network where we have administration, the administration's computers and the student data located. Next, the last bulleted item that's up there right now is desktop virtualization. I do not have enough time this evening. I'd probably take up the next 2 hours to discuss properly desktop virtualization and all the wonderful things that it could do for us. But if you're already familiar with it, and even if you're not, please, you can quickly look it up online and you'll find many wonderful resources on desktop virtualization. The idea behind desktop virtualization is this. Right now, we have access to lots of various pieces of software here in the school district and other resources. But when students come in, even on a BYOD pilot project that they have here at the high school right now, they do not have access to even print to a network printer here in the district because, again, they're restricted. They do not have access to software that maybe they learned. We have classes at the intermediate schools where the students learn how to use Photoshop and video editing software. They come up here to the high school and they don't have access to that same software because it's locked up in the computers down at the intermediate schools. What we'd like to do is we'd like to unlock that. And the way to unlock that is to create the virtual desktops or virtual applications. It also allows us to provide any of those applications to any device. So you can now pull out an iPad and it can be running just as fast as someone's brand new laptop, and they will be running applications that they never could on that iPad, such as Photoshop or maybe a version of Microsoft Excel or Word that again was not designed for the iPad. Because sometimes when you get those programs for those types of devices, they're watered down. They don't have all the full features that the other devices do. And we don't want those students to be at a disadvantage. So one of the ways to address that is through desktop virtualization. So I briefly bulleted a couple of the major highlights of desktop virtualization. That is increased productivity, and that's what I was referring to there. Simplified management, from my standpoint in my technology department, is very easy for us to roll out software updates when the machines are virtualized. We simply go onto the file server and we say, take the following virtual machines, upgrade all of them to Windows 10. Done. We don't have to do anything else. My technicians do not have to run around and physically touch every single computer and upgrade the software. We have simplified management. It's very easy to manage the machines. We can restrict what the students have access to on the machines based upon what courses they may be taking. We have enhanced security. A virus that is caught on one of those virtual machines is quickly locked down and it stays in that machine. It does not propagate out to other machines on the network. And finally, there's a cost savings. Now we're able to extend the lifespan of the existing equipment that we have in the district, as well as we don't have to go out and buy full-blown desktop computers anymore. I can now go out and buy what are referred to as thin clients. They cost about maybe 1/5 the cost of a desktop computer, but yet they would still allow the same processing power as a full-blown desktop computer through the use of desktop virtualization. Moving on to the next slide. While I will be talking about some of the new technology, we need to keep one thing in mind. There are always recurring costs that we will always have with our technology. And sometimes we forget that when we talk about the technology budget. We look at the numbers and we say, wow, that's a lot of money. But you need to keep this in perspective. There are new things that we're doing every year. However, we do have costs that we must continue to pay for in order to support that. So for example, I've highlighted them up there, a lot of the major ones. We have, of course, we have to pay for the district's internet connection. That is an obvious must. All of our buildings are tied together through a wide area network. It's private fiber optic cable that we had a vendor install last year, and we financed that out over 5 years, so we're currently paying for that. And of course, we have other communications costs, of course, our phone lines and things like that. So those types of costs are recurring. They're constantly coming back every year, and we have to pay for them. We, of course, have our hardware and software maintenance contracts. As we put in the new network equipment, we want to make sure that if there is an outage, that we can quickly get it repaired and or replaced by the manufacturer. So we do have maintenance contracts. Our student management system, Genesis, again, most of you, have gone into Genesis, you've logged into the portal, you've seen the capabilities, but again, there is a recurring cost every year because Genesis continues to make improvements. I think even if you've been going into the portal over the last year or two, you have seen some of those improvements and some of the changes they've made in just the portal, yet alone the entire system that we utilize here in the district for student administration and management. We, of course, have the programs and applications, our Microsoft license agreements and other programs. And finally, what Janine referred to, those various educational websites that we subscribe to, that the students and the teachers love so much. Next, when we encountered the superstorm a few years ago, Sandy, one of the things that came to the forefront then with our technology was that none of our data was being backed up outside of the Westfield High School. And if anything happened here at the high school specifically, all of our data could be lost. So one of the things that we implemented was a backup system that not only creates backups here on site, but then in the middle of the night sends all of those backups out to the cloud, to an off-site system. Well, of course, there's a recurring cost. Every year we have to pay for that. So that's one of our recurring costs. Of course, the district website that we have and our Honeywell alert system, those have recurring costs. So to give you an idea, the recurring costs that we have in the proposed 2015-16 budget is a total of $743,083. So that's just to give you an idea of how much these recurring costs add up. Next slide. So to talk a little bit real briefly, I think you've heard just about all of these items now, so I'll go through this very quickly. Here at the high school, these are the major improvements that we made this year. We, of course, put in the new network switches and infrastructure. We put Wi-Fi in every classroom. We virtualized all of the servers that we had here in the district. So where we had over 10 individual servers, individual boxes running, all of them consuming a lot of power, generating a lot of heat, we've been able to consolidate those down into one server, and it's running all of these individual servers through virtualization. We also installed a storage area network that now is being able to be accessed by our staff and our students, because especially here at the high school, all of our students this year have their own logins and can log into the network here. And one of the things they can do is they can save their files to that storage area network. Our staff can do the same thing. The advantage is that storage area network, we back up those files as well. So even if the students and the teachers are not worrying about backups, we are. We're backing up their work, and again, we're sending it to an off-site location, so we're not losing anything. And that, of course, goes for all the administration files as well. Finally, I did mention the bring your own device, that we need to implement proper security on our network for BYOD. And that is the last piece of our puzzle for this school year and the last item. And we will be implementing that in the next couple of weeks. We will start working on that project and have that implemented by end of this year, so that when school opens, at least here at the high school and hopefully at the intermediate schools with new Wi-Fi there, we will be able to fully support bring your own device, where any device can be brought in and it will be able to connect to our network, and we can be sure that it will not create a hazard to the rest of the devices on the network. So some of the new improvements that we're looking for in the 2015-16 school budget. Of course, we've gone over it over and over. The intermediate schools, we need to improve the network infrastructure. They need new network switches. We also want to do the same type of Wi-Fi rollout. We want this same type of coverage that you see in this room in large meeting spaces. We're looking to put access points in every single classroom so that that little spinning loading circle that you saw before that Adam had up there does not occur, that it's all instantaneous, so that when the students and the teachers need access to the data and they want that immediate response, they get it. Now, of course, there's a cost associated. So what we did is, one of our advantages that we have is we always try to leverage our buying power as a school district. And one of the things that we're able to always usually get is we're able to finance, and usually we can finance at 0% financing. So we've already secured financing to move forward with this project if it is approved in the budget. And there will be a payment, the first payment of 3 payments. Obviously, it's a 3-year purchase, and that will be $192,136. So 3 payments over the next 3 years, totaling close to $600,000, will take care of our intermediate schools. Now, of course, the high school network that we just installed, we did the same thing. And we will have in the budget, we have the second payment for the high school's network. So that is a total of $369,509. It's a much larger number, but there are a lot of other items in there that go to support district. For example, that security that I talked about for bring your own device, the costs for that are in there, but that security is for our entire district. It's not just the high school. So there are other things for that, while we keep saying high school network, it's beyond just the access points and the switches here at the high school. There are things that support the entire district. We also have in the budget $242,000 for, again, what Janine alluded to. Again, we still need to refresh some of the existing computers that we have, and one of the most important ones actually is the elementary school, and that is our 4th and 5th grade classroom computers. They're now approaching 7 and 8 years old. No matter what we do, we need to replace them. So we need to, so we're looking to replace as many of those as we can. Moving forward, here's where we start to get into a little bit of the forecasting. We have our plan of what we would like to do, and it's pretty easy in the 2016-17 school year. We will look to then go and roll out our new network infrastructure and Wi-Fi at the elementary schools. And again, using that same, purchasing it out over 3 years at 0% financing, it will be a cost of $205,000 per year. Now, of course, I'm not looking at next year's budget yet. No one else here is, so of course I put the little asterisk in there in that this purchase is based upon budget priorities, because we all know that the various priorities come up every year in the budget. So hopefully in 16-17's budget, we will be able to keep that and move forward. Keeping in mind, I did put it at the bottom, we will have the final payment for the high school network in 16-17, and we will be making payment number 2 for the middle school networks. 17-18, we will then look to start rolling out our virtualization. So to purchase the software, the licenses, and all the equipment to supply 5,000 virtual desktops that would cover students, staff members, and start moving forward with the virtual project, it would be at a cost of $570,000 per year for 3 years. Same thing, purchased out over 3 years, 3 years of financing, and again, it's based upon budget priorities. Then finally, we will have the final payment for the middle school networks and the second payment for the elementary networks. And obviously, the high school's network and everything has been paid off. So some of the money that we're looking at for the virtualization, in a way, is already there in the budget because it would have been there for the high school payment. And again, forecasting even further along, I'm really going into the future here, 18-19 and 19-20. In the 18-19 budget, we'll be looking to make our second payment for the virtualization project, final payment for the elementary networks, and in 19-20, 2019 to 2020, we'll be looking for the final payment for the virtualization. And of course, that's probably the best I can do at being a prognosticator and doing that. If all that holds true and everything looks good, maybe I should get into weather forecasting. So.
I just want to add on behalf of the Technology Committee, thank you very much. We've worked very hard on this for, a long time, almost weekly for the last few years, but I really want to thank Brian and Paul and Janine and Adam for all of their hard work that they put into this presentation and really getting us to where we need to be. And I think we've made some great accomplishments, and I thank Dr. Dolan too for the leadership in allowing us to make these huge strides that we've made in the last few years. So there's still more to go, but we're, I think, doing it off to a great start. So thank you.
I just wanted to emphasize the importance of our master technology teachers. Not every school district, most don't have them. And I really believe that they bridge the gap for technology and our teachers. I can't emphasize enough the professional development that they provide. Our students are digital natives, and they've grown up with technology, and they're growing up with technology. A lot of our teachers haven't, and they need that hand to be held. A lot of them, some of them are tech savvy, some of them need that guidance. And without the master tech teachers helping them, technology wouldn't be taking us anywhere. So I just really want to emphasize and thank the board for supporting us with that. Thanks, Brian.
I'd just make a few quick comments and one question. First of all, thank you to everyone who presented tonight and who had a hand in putting together the presentation at all. I thought it was excellent in terms of showing us where we have been, where we are now, and where we're hoping to go with technology, because we can't stand still. If you stand still, you're moving backwards, as they say, and we are by no means moving backwards. I think we're very forward-looking, and we're moving forward with technology in an educated manner. Which brings me to my next comment. Brian, you referred to it as forecasting as you talked to the out years through the 1920 school year. I actually look at it very differently. I agree there's forecasting, but there's an educated basis, and particularly where you're talking about multi-year payments, we know those numbers are locked. But from a board's perspective, I think we need to understand that we're buying into those out years. I get that we are only approving a one-year budget, but I think we all need to think long and hard about the fact that we need to be committed to this for multi-years, because the money we put into technology today won't have the benefit that we should get from it if we don't continue to build on it, if we don't continue to keep it current. So we'll all look at this our own way, but personally, I'm looking at this as a multi-year commitment on the board's perspective, and I think that you need to keep us, and everyone who presented tonight needs to keep us up to date, current in information and knowledge every year, because you need to be able to come back to us and say, hey, this is now the next step. Remember what we told you a year ago? Here's what we've done, and here's where it's going, and you guys need to maintain the commitment, or it all sort of falls apart. I just had one question, which is on the funding, which is on procurement. Do we do an RFP for everything we're going to purchase, or do we use state providers, or how do we ensure that we don't just get a low-cost provider, but we get the low cost and the high quality, because that you really need both?
Correct. So what we do, and one of the changes that we have in our purchasing is, normally in the past, we could purchase off a state contract, where the state has, as a matter of fact, the state of New Jersey belongs to a consortium of multiple states. And that consortium, with their buying power, they're able to negotiate purchases from major vendors. So if the networking equipment is coming from Cisco, or the computers are coming from Hewlett-Packard, or wherever these devices are coming from, and that consortium is called WISCA. So we normally buy under the WISCA contract, and that allows us to get extremely competitive prices, better than if we went out and we did a standard bid or an RFP. Now, there is one thing that's a little bit different this coming school year, 15-16, that is different than in the past. One of the purchasing vehicles that we've used to get, I guess, some funds refunded to the district was E-Rate, which is a federally funded program for telecommunications. Normally in the past, Westfield would only qualify for E-Rate reimbursement for telecommunications costs such as phone lines, internet service, and wide area network connectivity. We would qualify for about a 30% rebate. So we would get, out of every $100 we spent, we got $30 back. Something changed in the E-rate program this year. And when I say this year, I really mean next school year, the 2015-16 school year, where E-rate has decided that, you know, traditional phone lines are not worth paying for anymore. Everyone is now switching over to voice over IP and other technologies to provide communication services. So what they're doing now is they're also recognizing that in order to take advantage of those types of services, you must put in the type of networking infrastructure that we talked about. I mentioned the switches, I mentioned the wireless access points. So for the first time in kind of the history of this program, we actually applied for funds for our networking projects. And if approved, unfortunately we will not know if we're approved until this fall sometime, but if approved, we would actually get 30% back on these projected costs. So that's in addition to the discounts that we're already seeing with the state contract that we're purchasing under.
Thank you.
Rich, I just want to make one comment for the board's sake. As a member of the Technology Committee, I have sat with Rich, with Mitch, with Mark Friedman for months talking about what this virtualization is, and it has struck us most recently, and I need to just tell you a little bit about why it's so critical and what it buys us. By building a robust back end of an infrastructure that has a built-in high secure environment and great power, broadband and Wi-Fi support, it allows any device to be brought into the environment of our school system. Then that device looks like any other device. It doesn't matter what that device is. It can be a cell phone. It can be an iPad. It can be a very high-quality iPad. It can be a laptop computer. Regardless of what that device is, it becomes immaterial when connected to the environment that is virtualized that we present. And every device has access to the same environment and the power of that environment, which is why we don't talk about a one-to-one environment here. We don't talk about going out and buying Chromebooks. We don't talk about iPads. We don't talk about laptops for every student. What we want to do is harness the power of whatever device a student either brings to us or we decide at the time is right for the instructional support, and then we use that device to access the power of all of the applications, the processes, the storage that we have, the data that's within our virtualized environment. That's what virtualization means to us. So it's any device, anytime, anywhere, which is the strategy that the Technology Committee put into play 3 years ago when we started to talk about what do we want out of this situation. So I hope that's helped a little bit.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right.
And
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you all. And as promised, that was part one, because technology is a very important part of our budget, but is just a part of the budget. And for the overview of the entire budget, I'm now going to turn this over to our business administrator, Dana Sullivan.
So as you know, we've been talking about the budget for several meetings beginning in January. We've actually been working, administrators and principals throughout the district since literally September on the 2015-16 budget. At last week's board meeting, we had actually a workshop which began late in the evening, and we did do a detailed presentation of the budget. This is more of an overview of the budget. We are asking for adoption. We actually need to adopt the tentative budget this evening. We will then revisit the budget on April 28th, and that'll be our final adoption. It's important to understand that we can, although we're adopting a budget tonight and then we'll adopt the final budget on April 28th, we can reallocate within that budget. So although we can't increase it at that point, we can make reallocations where we reduce from one end and increase on another side. So we've talked about, in our last board meeting, we talked about some reductions, but many of those are not yet final. As we work through where we are going to be with staffing for next year and enrollment for next year, and we start making finalized staffing decisions, then we'll make our final reductions, which will come to you at a later date. So we used as a tool for our budget development this year, we used that guiding change document. And out of that document, we got some goals for the budget. And the first one was to maintain our district programs at the level of excellence that they currently are at. We also wanted to maintain class sizes around the parameters and sizes that they are now. We talked about technology for a long time, but technology was a priority in the budget, and we wanted to fund that to the level that we felt we needed to continue the commitment to technology. And we wanted to deliver a responsible budget to the taxpayers that was at the state's cap and also upheld our record of being an efficient spending and low spending district. So along those lines, the state every year collects audited data from every school district in New Jersey. And they publish the data in what they call a comparative cost per pupil. So there's a couple of things such as out-of-district tuition for special ed students that are taken out of this calculation because they're so unique to each school district that it could throw the numbers off. So there's a few things, that's one of them. And out-of-district transportation also for special ed students is another part of it that gets pulled out. And this is 2012, 2013 audited data, and that's the most recent data we have available to us at this point. You can see Westfield spends $12,662 a student. The state average, and this is the state average for K-12 districts that have more than 3,500 students. State average is $14,173. And we picked a number of school districts that are somewhat comparable to us in either size or demographics, and we're low spending compared to most of them. So our enrollment, over the last 25 years, our enrollment has increased about 45%. So in 1990, we had 4,300 students. We're now approaching 6,300 students. So we have significant enrollment increases, as do many other districts in New Jersey. At the same time, you can see what our state aid has done. So while our enrollment has gone up dramatically, in 1990, about a little less than 9% of our budget was supported by state aid. Now we are down to less than 4% and then have been hovering at that number for a number of years. In 2010, we took a dramatic decrease and we were down below 2%. So luckily we've recovered from that a little bit, but we are still significantly underfunded as far as state aid goes. So the revenue side of our budget, and this is just the operating portion of our budget. 14, 15, 15, 16, our tax levy there's a 2% increase on the tax levy that is, we are capped at. In addition to that, we have certain items in the budget that will allow us to increase above the tax levy. Our health insurance increases are actually the only thing that we qualify for. So we were actually able to increase our budget by 3% in order to take advantage of that waiver because our health insurance costs were rising significantly. Our state aid, our basic state aid stayed flat at $2.9 million. Our extraordinary special ed aid, which is given for extraordinary costs for certain students, we expect that to go down. We don't have definite figures on that yet, but we expect that that may decrease a little bit because we did not receive $1 million last year. Special Ed Medicaid initiative is a number we get directly from the state, so that we're budgeting that at $31,000. Last year, we used $1.4 million of our fund balance as a revenue, and we've been using that dollar amount for the last several years. The Finance Committee and the board felt that we should start reducing that number because we no longer think we can sustain appropriating $1.4 million every year as a revenue. So we reduced that amount to $1 million in the 15-16 budget, thinking that 16-17 we're probably going to have to reduce that again, and we didn't want to have to take such a big hit in 16-17. So that's the reduction there. Other revenue makes up miscellaneous revenue, which is interest income, building rental revenue. So we have some increases in that area, some tuition for some programs that we run in district that we're able to charge tuition for. So we did anticipate somewhat of an increase there. prior year purchase orders in 14-15 are just purchase orders that roll from the prior year. They increase the budget when they roll, so that wouldn't be reflected in 15-16 yet. And then because we're not appropriating the $1.4 million that I talked about from 14-15 from fund balance, we are putting $459,000 into a maintenance reserve account. And that's because we can only hold 2% fund balance in reserves for emergencies, which we currently have. Anything above and beyond that, we must use in the 15-16 budget. So we're using $1 million to cover our costs, and then the remaining portion of that we're using to put into a maintenance reserve account to use for facility upgrades. And then in 14-15, again, maintenance and capital reserve funds were used, which means we increased the budget when we took them out of the maintenance and reserve accounts. So there's an overview of our revenue for both 14-15 and 15-16. The impact of the tax rate, there's two pieces of the budget that are impacting taxes. One is the operating budget we just talked about, and the other is debt service. So the two pieces of that combined, the school tax will go from 4.96 to $5.14. So for an average homeowner, they'll see a $314 increase on school taxes per year. So now moving to the expenditure side of the budget. This chart shows breakdown of where our expenses are going. So as it should be, and as of course we want to maintain, 61% of our budget goes directly to instruction. The next big piece of the pie is child study team, related services, and extraordinary services. So those are all support services that are going directly to support students, and that's about 9% of our budget. Maintenance, insurance, and utilities is 7.5% of our budget, and maintenance, of course, is because our buildings are old, and utilities as well. We don't always have the most efficient systems because our buildings are old, so we do spend quite a bit of money there. Health, guidance, and library, again, those are support services for students, and that makes up 5.6% of our budget. And then you can see we have support services, tech, central admin, and building admin. They're both in the roughly 4% of our budget, and then there are the other small pieces there. So just under 80% of our budget goes for staffing and benefits for staff. That's not unique to Westfield. Every school district in New Jersey is very labor intensive, so basically 80% of every school district's budget does go towards staffing. The breakdown of our staff, we have 47.7% of our staff are regular ed teachers. Just under 29% of our staff are special ed teachers and paras. And then we have, again, the other areas there, maintenance, principals, supervisors, and secretaries, operations, and again, nurses, guidance, and librarians are support staff for students. So we wanted to give you a feel that, you know, we know what's in the budget as far as we're meeting our basic core requirements, but we're also offering a lot above and beyond that. And one of the first goal that we talked about was maintaining programs to the level of excellence that they are currently at. So these slides will give you a feel for some of that excellence, and we are maintaining all of these in our 15-16 budget. So starting with the high school, and I'm not going to read all of this, but we offer more than 175 courses to just under 2,000 students. We have more than 80 co-curricular activities offered. We offer 17 advanced placement courses, and we have an alternative college prep program for students that are average and above average. Each area, we've listed some courses that are above and beyond the basics again. So math, you can see there we have a number of math classes that many other districts don't offer. Foreign language, we have Mandarin 1, 2, and 3, as well as additional Spanish courses above the regular Spanish 1, 2, 3, and 4. Social studies, we have areas there that we offer. So you can see in every area of discipline we offer courses that are unique courses. English, science, we had a couple of new courses offered this year, and I know we have a couple new courses coming next year for science, physical education, and continuing on visual and performing arts. We have a number of courses there, and of course, athletics. At the elementary level, we have fine and practical arts in 6th and 7th grade. We have a number of elective courses for 8th graders, 3 full years of French or Spanish for intermediate schools, student leadership opportunities, including student council and peer leadership, and we also offer winter sports for 8th graders. And many of these things are things that districts do not offer, especially after 2010 when state aid was drastically cut. Many of these things you see here are things that were reduced in other districts that year. At the elementary level, we still have library and media centers. We still offer foreign language at grades 3, 4, and 5. We have numerous art and music courses and gifted program. And at all of our schools, we have a variety of specialists that are available to meet needs of students, including counselors, psychologists, social workers, nurses, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and learning disabilities and teachers consultants. And accomplishments of our students from all of these programs that we've talked about, and in addition to the ones that we announced here tonight, 97% of our Westfield High School graduates continue their education. Our SAT scores surpassed state average by 202 points. We took first place in Science Olympiad, and our intermediate students did. 143 of our high school students were recognized in national world language exams. Our Model United Nations Club won an Outstanding Delegation Award. We have fine art students, and I think we mentioned a few of them here tonight, that were recognized at the regional and state levels. And we had 4 county and 3 state sectional athletic championships. And again, this is just the calendar of the budget. Many of these dates have passed already. We've had numerous budget discussions. And we will, again, tonight adopt the tentative budget, which is due to the Union County Superintendent by Friday. Sometime between Friday and April 23rd, they will give us approval to advertise that budget and advertise the public hearing. And that will be done in the Westfield Leader on April 23rd. And then on April 28th, we'll hold a public hearing and final adoption. Those dates, the dates from now until April 23rd are pretty much set by the state. There's a 1-week time period that we are allowed to hold our public hearing. So that's where we're getting the date of April 28th from. It was sometime in that week that we had to hold our public hearing. So the summary, I'm sorry, one more slide. The summary of all of these things, and these are repeats of everything I've mentioned in the past. So our budget is at the state adjusted cap. All of the technology presentation that we talked about earlier and all of the things that we plan to do in 15, 16, those funds are included in this budget to accomplish that. The budget maintains current programs and services. The reliance on our fund balance is being reduced from $1.4 million to $1 million. And we are able to add $459,000 to our maintenance reserve, which will help us in the future with our facility upgrades. Is there any questions on the budget?
Thank you, Dana. That was very helpful. I mean, we've been through it a couple of times, and this level of detail I think is helpful in tying it into the technology initiative from my perspective, understanding how, where we are with the cap and knowing. I don't know that you got into it this time, but last time you talked about the guiding principles. One of the first of which was to prioritize technology, and we've done that. I did hear you mention one of the guiding principles was to maintain program, and particularly recently approved programs, and I think we've done that as well. So thank you for putting that all together.
I would just say too that So this was the first time that we as a board decided to use this guiding change document to kind of work through this process. And I think we learned a lot, but I think it was a successful result. And I know we're not quite through the whole budget process yet, but I think we made a commitment to try this process, and it worked. And it certainly helped clarify, I think, for each of us what our roles are in terms of governance versus management. So I would just encourage us all to continue to think about this as a tool for us when we have, these big items that we need to tackle and to process through. And certainly, any feedback from the administration in terms of your perspective on how it worked, I think it's a continuing conversation. And so, but I do think it was successful this go around. So, thanks.
And I would just add, I think it was successful as well because it forced us early on in the process for the board to agree upon goals, which then we could work to meet those goals. So I think the process was helpful.
And it's not static. I mean, it's
Right.
changing. And so, yeah, I thought it was a good use of the process. So.
Are we approving that at this time or under finance?
Under finance.
Okay. Anything else on superintendent report?
No, that's it for superintendent report.
Thank you very much. I'd ask the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on February 17, 2015, and the private minutes of February 17, 2015. Can I have a second? Thank you, Mitch. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Personnel, in Mark's absence, I'd ask the board to consider personnel motions 1 through 10, and I don't believe there were any addendums, right?
No.
Okay. If I have a second, Ginny, thank you. Any comments or questions on personnel?
There's a couple retirements.
Dr.
Yes, I do have 4 retirements to announce. First one is Josephine Ordi Macaluso. She has worked in the business office for 18 years. She began as the transportation secretary and then moved into the position of executive secretary to the business administrator. She's looking forward to spending more time with her family, especially her growing number of grandchildren. They do seem to grow by the week, it seems. Our second retiree is Rosemary DiBattista. She started her tenure at Westfield High School in 2002. Rosemary has taught English 1, Journalism 1, and Journalism 2, as well as print journalism. She shares that the highlight of her work here has been advising Hi-Zi and fostering so many talented young writers. And I think those young writers would agree that has been a highlight of their careers as well. Our third retiree is Yayeko Knaus. For over 25 years, she has worked with Westfield students, first as an ESL teacher and then assisting with the basic skills development. Yayeko has worked in 7 out of our 10 schools and has become a valued colleague in each of them. And as an ESL teacher and a basic skill teacher, she has worked tirelessly with her students and their families, helping them in countless ways. It's actually wonderful to watch her with children. Her entire focus is on those students. She doesn't even know when I walk in a room because she's so focused on working with those children. And our fourth retiree is Margaret Teitelbaum. She has been a nurse and the coordinator of our nurses for over 29 years. She is knowledgeable. I'm going to underline this next word. She is unflappable, which is what all good nurses and medical people are, I find. And she's also compassionate. And she's respected deeply by students, parents, and staff at Westfield High School and by this superintendent and throughout the entire district. She always stays current on health practices and medical information and brings wisdom and institutional history to the Westfield High School administration team. And we will miss all 4 of these retirees going forward.
All right. If there's nothing else on personnel, we'll then move to facilities.
You need to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Rich Matesic.
Yes.
Lucy Biegler.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Chris Langhart.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Olig.
Yes.
Peggy Oster.
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
All right, we'll then move to facilities. First, I'd note that we do have a facilities committee meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow with a very lengthy agenda to go through projects and an overview of, I believe, our 5-year plan and various other topics. Next, I would ask the board to consider facilities motion number 1. Dana, do you want to tell us about that? Could I have a second? You want to separate them, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ginny, thank you. Dana, could you just?
This is, we get our insurance. We're part of a consortium for liability and property insurance through New Jersey Schools Insurance Group. And mostly every year, they offer a grant for safety purposes. You can apply for it, and usually they give us the amount. I think it's $50,000 for next year. So we have security upgrades that we have planned for all of our schools, but 2 of our schools did not qualify for SDA grants from the state of New Jersey. So we wrote the grant with New Jersey Schools Insurance to pay for some of those upgrades at those 2 schools that are not funded with state grants.
Great. Any comments or questions on that item? Why don't we take that?
Rich Matazik?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Langhart?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
I'd ask the board to consider facilities motion number 2, which is regarding a pilot program for temporary lighting at Keeler Field. Can I have a second? Mitch, thank you. Before, I'd just like to say give us a brief reminder of how we got to this point, after which I'll ask Mr. Kaplow to make a few comments, and then the board, and certainly, as I mentioned, the public is welcome to speak for as long as we'd like. Just to remind us that the Westfield Soccer Association approached the Board of Education approximately 6 to 7 weeks ago through our business administrator, requesting a 10-week pilot program to utilize lights at Keeler Field. That pilot program is as outlined in the agenda. Facilities met on February 12th, which is generally the first stop for a facilities request. Facilities Committee agreed to take that proposal to the full board. The full board did meet and discuss the pilot on February 17th. The WSA did present. Sandy Mamery, our athletic director, did present. No action was taken at that meeting. We viewed it purely as information gathering. The board met last Tuesday, March 10th, and everybody who wanted to was permitted to speak on this topic throughout the evening. No action was taken by the board last week. We did listen to all statements made, and concluded that with respect to one point, we should reconfirm the board's understanding in light of residents' statements that permits, planning board review or approval, and other requirements must be met or followed before proceeding with the pilot program. That was not the board's understanding, but we agreed to ask our business administrator and counsel to seek confirmation in that regard. The board has, in fact, been advised of such confirmation, and I will let our counsel, Rick Kaplow, explain that, since concerns were raised by the residents who attended. A separate issue that came up last week had to do with instituting monitoring to the extent there are complaints from the pilot, should we move forward. If the pilot is approved, we will post a phone number on our website that will have 2 consequences. One, there will be a requirement that a member of the Westfield Soccer Association be on site the first week and be immediately available thereafter. They will have a list of board members who have agreed to go to Keeler in the event there are calls or complaints, and they'll be immediately accessible as well. A process will be posted on the website that would require the Westfield Soccer Association each night to log by email to our business administrator any complaints that are received and how they were handled, and there will be a way for residents to similarly report to the business administrator anything that they had concerns about, so we can reconcile what's being reported to us. And if this does move forward, that will be all laid out before anything is implemented. With that, I'd like Mr. Kaplow to advise the board as to his confirmation regarding this pilot. And then, as I said, we'll go to the board for discussion and take comments or questions from the public.
Thank you. My name is Richard Kaplow. I'm the Board of Education counsel.
Hey, Rick, can either look this way or move your microphone?
Okay. I was presented with an unsigned letter, several pages long, that was directed specifically to me by name and to the Board of Education, that went through allegations that the proposal for temporary lighting at the Kaler Field was in several respects violative of the municipal land use ordinance for the town of Westfield and/or other legal provisions. I have done several things since I received those allegations just a few days ago. I have discussed the issue and the allegations with the zoning officer for the town of Westfield, and she immediately challenged the idea that there was jurisdiction on these issues in the planning board or board of adjustment. I too challenge the existence of such jurisdiction. The allegations and the violations alleged seem to center around the idea that somehow the temporary lighting proposal constitutes a improper use, and there's an allegation that this use at the Kaler Field is what's called a conditional use under the land use ordinance. I also challenge that conclusion. In fact, I believe that there's no part of this proposal that constitutes or implicates a conditional use. I would direct the writer of this allegation, who did not sign it, to take a look at 18.04G of the local town land use ordinance that is short, but it provides parks, public playgrounds, and municipal uses of all kinds are not considered conditional uses and are permitted in all zones without the necessity for use approval, conditional use approval, or site plan review and approval by the planning board or board of adjustment. Specifically, in an RS-12 residential zone, an athletic field, public park, or playground is a specifically permitted use. There's no part of this, in my opinion and interpretation, that constitutes a conditional use. There is no part of this proposal that necessitates the expenditure of public monies, and I therefore have advised this board that I don't believe that an application to the planning board or board of adjustment is required or necessary to move forward. And of course, I'm speaking only to the issue of whether or not the proposal constitutes in whole or in part some violation of the land use ordinance or other applicable statute or regulation. This board is all about compliance with the law. Every member of this board who has spoken to me at all about this issue has made it very clear that they want full and complete compliance with the law. They don't want to be in violation of anything. They're not looking to be in violation of anything. And so I would invite the public under section 7.02 of the Westfield Land Use Ordinance to direct any allegations that this board's proposal, the lighting proposal, is in violation of the land use ordinance, direct those problems or complaints or issues to the Board of Adjustment, because your land use ordinance specifically provides that that's what should be done. The Board of Adjustment is there to hear any request for interpretation, any special question, any issue or allegation with regard to application of the ordinance to this proposal, or whether or not any aspect of this proposal violates the ordinance. So what you do is you If you believe that there's a violation, you bring that before the town, the Board of Adjustment, and by its own ordinance, they will hear it and decide it. Once again, I am only speaking to the issue of whether or not there is a specific violation of the land use ordinance or other statute, because the board and I received a lengthy set of allegations that there were in fact such violations, and I have so advised the board that in my opinion there are not. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any board members have questions or comments of Rick or on the pilot?
I have a question.
Sure.
So I just want to be clear that we had said that if for any reason we discovered that if we were to pilot this and the lights were intrusive, as you claim they can be, or the noise, that this can be terminated at any time, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and also, I just wanted to clarify if the WSA has a contract with any of the generators company, or if there's any cost to the WSA that we are, we're not held to any of that if this program needs to be terminated before the 10-week period's over.
Yeah, that's my understanding, Dana. We're not at all obligated to pay for any of this, right? No. Thank you.
Okay.
Rich, I would just want to say, I think some people, have said this seems to be a precursor to a more permanent situation at the field. I've always looked at this as a pilot program, exactly what we've called it, as a means of seeing as whether this is a way to kind of alleviate what seems to be a clear need for practice field time and space against the concerns of the neighborhood, which I am sensitive to, and I think everybody on the board is. It's something I take into serious consideration, but I think given the situation, it seems like there's an obligation to see if this is a solution, maybe not a permanent one, but maybe more of a fact-gathering time to see if this is something that could help the town. And sometimes for the benefit of the town, it doesn't benefit everyone within the town, but I think we just don't know, and that's always been my feeling about this. I've never considered it a permanent plan or something that may or may not come back, with any degree of certainty, but it's just as a means to see how this may work.
Thank you. Mitch?
Yeah, I guess I would add to what was said is that I don't see how it could ever be a permanent plan because we just don't have the money. That's just a fact.
Anyone else? All right, I'd open it up to the public. Just a reminder, please state your name and address, and please try to speak closely to the mic so we can all hear you and avoid feedback. Thank you.
John Blake, Carlton Road. Mr. Kaplow, I was wondering, in the various ordinances that exist, they make reference to land on which the schools are located and land on which the administrative offices of the Board of Education exist. And they are clearly under the control of the Board of Education. It would seem, however, that other lands owned by the Board of Education would have to go to the land use ordinances. And when you're referring to the fact that you're now telling us that Taylor Field is a park or a recreation public item, isn't it cared for totally by the Board of Education as opposed to the Recreation Department of Westfield? If you want to have space to play a game over in Tamaqua Park, don't you have to make application to the town to reserve a field? But if you want to have something to do with Kaler, you go to the Board of Education. The Board of Education holds that separate and apart from the parks of Westfield and the general lands specifically under the title of the town of Westfield. How can you say that parks and things that are owned by Westfield is the same as Kaler? it's privately owned by the Board of Education, I would assume.
I don't so assume, respectfully. I also disagree with your first statement. The zoning ordinance separates out space used for administrative use by the Board of Education from other space used for schools, and they're totally separate provisions. With all due respect, I know you're an attorney, and so am I. My role is to provide advice, legal advice, to my client, the Westfield Board of Education, not to engage in a legal argument at a public meeting. I advise my board, my client, as an attorney, privately in a lawyer-client setting like any other attorney. I respect what you have to say. I stand by my statement that no aspect of what's being proposed constitutes a prohibited use or a conditional use. If you disagree with me, I invite you certainly to go to the Planning Board or Board of Adjustment and make whatever arguments you feel are appropriate.
Sir, I didn't mean to get into a debate or ask you what your private consultation with your clients were. However, I didn't want it to make it sound like there was anything other than your interpretation being given and that another interpretation exists. And in the same fashion that one landowner may file a complaint in municipal court against another landowner, I don't believe that the only recourse is to go to the Board of Adjustment. If such a complaint is filed, certainly would have to be handled by a judge outside of Westfield, because you couldn't possibly use the local municipal court. It'd be in conflict of interest, I would suggest. So there are other things that I would suggest are leaving the board quite open to problems, and they can't pass it off to the soccer association. They're the landowner. And the fact that you are allowing somebody else to misuse your property, if it's considered a misuse, doesn't excuse the landowner.
Once again, I respectfully disagree. The municipal court in Westfield hears zoning ordinance violations in every session. I don't agree with you that they couldn't possibly hear this application if one is made. You are certainly entitled to file a complaint that there has been a violation of some aspect of the land use ordinance. It happens all the time, and I respect your opinion.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Steve Aronson, 615 Westfield Avenue, and president of the Westfield Soccer Association. I again want to thank the board for strongly considering our community proposal for temporary lights at Keller. As mentioned last week, approving this proposal has a significant and positive impact on many of our more than 70 spring season teams, as well as hundreds of high school athletes who use Keller every weekday afternoon. If approved, we'll work diligently to be good stewards of the field, like we are with all Board of Ed, in-town, and county fields. We understand that this proposal will likely introduce some noise and light into some neighborhood homes. We do not know the extent of that intrusion and can only find out if we move forward with the proposal for the trial period. As we do with all of our teams, but especially here, we'll instruct our players and trainers using the field in the evening to be mindful of our responsibility to conduct ourselves like good neighbors. If approved, we want to minimize disturbances, and we'll do what we can to minimize them without sacrificing training session quality. As a sign of our good faith, we reviewed our club needs once again this week to determine if we could alleviate most, if not all, of our most challenging field issues by reducing our request from 5 weeknights to 4. This now depends on youth lacrosse requests for April and May. We pledge to work through this quickly if the proposal is approved. I also want to make it known tonight that we've advised our club members not to come back and speak at tonight's meeting to respect the many other business matters that the Board of Ed must consider and discuss. We simply don't believe that having our members come to the podium again this week to repeat many of the same types of stories as last week will add new perspective to the issue. Of course, some did choose to come anyway, as did many of our WSA board members, and I cannot be sure that they will not speak tonight despite my request. And finally, we heard many times last week that youth sports within and outside the high school are part of the educational fabric of any well-functioning community. Any quality community needs to be progressive in finding ways to serve important needs. The WSA views this temporary light proposal as a Band-Aid solution for the spring season when field resources are in shortest supply. It is not our intention for this temporary lighting to be the first step toward permanent lighting at Keller Field. Ideally, however, we hope a new turf field, but one with permanent lights, could become a reality in Westfield in the not-too-distant future, and at a place where very few, or better yet, none, would be inconvenienced or disturbed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susan Bottorff. I live at 514 Grove Street, so that my backyard is almost directly behind one of the goalposts of the field. I've lived in that home for 30 years. 2 of my children graduated from the schools in Westfield, and my son was a traveling soccer player in the early years of soccer in this town. I enjoy living by the field. I came from the Midwest, and it's open, and so that allows me to have a little bit of openness around the home where I live. But I am very concerned about the future that might be planned for the field. And so I just have a couple comments to make. I started thinking about the fields in other surrounding communities, and some of them I could recall, where they are from driving around, of course. I couldn't remember where the Scotch Plains Fanwood field was, because I really had never seen it, I guess. So I went looking, and it's pretty secluded. I also do not think that they have lights on that field. I couldn't see them anyway. Clark, they have a lot of space around their high school, so their field is way back. Cranford, edge of town, a lot of space, kind of down in a little dip. There are lights in that field, I believe. Plainfield, I did not drive over there again. I know where that field is. It's by the old Muhlenberg Hospital. I think it's 2 in a little dip, fairly closer maybe to homes. And I should backtrack and say, Scotch Plains, there are homes around there, but it's a fairly big piece of property. And there are trees that protect, I think, the yards of the closest homes. Think of where your field is. There's very little land. It's right up against either the school or the stadium or the homes on the 2 ends of the field. You don't have barriers, very few barriers. There was a barrier that was put up years ago. We were lucky. The barrier stayed, it grew pretty high in our backyard, but most of that field does not have a barrier. So I would hope too that there could be some arrangements for more playing time for the students, the kids in this town. But could we look for a place where there's more space so that it's a little more respectful of the people that live nearby. And I do appreciate all of the work that's gone into thinking about this and presenting and the comments that have been made. And the tenor of this whole discussion has been overall much better than I expected. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. Scott Roger, 555 Washington Street, Westfield. In the previous Board of Education meeting, Mr. Franks of the Westfield Soccer Association dismissed every concern voiced by neighbors of Keller Stadium, stating these things will never happen. Mr. Franks stated there were no accidents or parking issues at Sid Fay Houlihan Field since the installation of lights, and that Keller Stadium would be operated without incident or complaint, just like Sid Fay Houlihan. When pressed for facts to support these claims, Mr. Franks admitted that he had none, and that these statements were actually only his opinion. The only factual statements made by Mr. Franks were that the Westfield Soccer Association needs more practice space, and that lighting Keller Stadium would not begin to alleviate the Westfield Soccer Association's field use issues. So in attempts to resolve this issue, Mr. Franks decided that a sacrifice needed to be made, and he approached the board about lighting Keller Stadium at night, an issue previously addressed under the administration of Superintendent Foley back in 2004 when proposing the turf field for Keller Stadium. By entertaining this idea and putting a motion on the floor before the board, Mr. Matesich has shown his support for this pilot program and that he too felt that a sacrifice needed to be made. Now, the solution devised by Mr. Franks was not one where he and the Westfield Soccer Association sacrificed and spent time raising funds to turf an additional field. The solution agreed upon by Mr. Matesich did not involve sacrifice on the part of the school sports program, such as ending school sports at 5 p.m. to grant the Soccer Association access to a turf field from 5 p.m. to dark. So after this idea was presented before the board, every soccer mom, every volunteer coach that Mr. Franks could muster come forward, touting the importance of organized sports and insinuating that we, the neighbors of Keller Stadium, were trying to inhibit children's growth by not immediately agreeing to this plan. And again, they stated someone needed to sacrifice. They were also quick to point out that none of them were neighbors of Keller Stadium, and it would not be them who sacrificed. So like most instances throughout history, those choosing to sacrifice, in fact, are willing to sacrifice nothing, and those being sacrificed are being done so against their will. Now, Mr. Franks made a rather insulting analogy at the previous meeting where he compared the neighbors of Keller Stadium to children who will not eat their vegetables. And he stated that if we tried it, we might like it. Well, I say to you, Mr. Franks, and to the board, this is not new fare to us. This is a dish we have been forced to partake in for years, and we can tolerate no more. We are not here for what we fear may happen by a little light and a little noise, as it's been phrased. We're here because of what we have already seen happen based on our experience with extended field use since Keller Stadium has been turfed. You've tried to present this as a not in my backyard issue, but in truth it is not. You're already here in our backyard, and your actions have shown you to be an inconsiderate neighbor. Now, Mr. Matesich, in the previous meeting, you put this motion before the board and stated, let's see if increased field use is truly an inconvenience. When pressed for how this inconvenience would be measured, you stated that the litmus test for success or failure of this pilot program would be based on complaints. You then admitted that no venue at that time was in place to address complaints. Now, obviously, these complaints would only come from us, the neighbors of Keller Stadium. So according to your plan, not only are we to be inconvenienced every night for the next 3 months, but we are forced to spend our nights monitoring field usage. Yet our word would be insufficient, and our complaints would have to be verified by a Board of Ed member. Now, the Westfield Police Department has an incredible response time, often under 5 minutes for most issues throughout the entire town, and even they do not always respond fast enough to actually witness a violation. Are we to expect that we will have instantaneous response from a member of the board when we lodge our complaints? If you valued our opinion, you would have notified all the neighbors when you had your trial run with a generator 3 weeks ago. The fact you did not shows your true intentions. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Your actions speak so loudly I cannot hear what you are saying." You are asking us to trust you to be fair in the decision-making process. You are being completely dismissive of our current concerns based on our experiences. If you force me to spend the next 3 months monitoring Keller Stadium, I will do so, but to the best of my ability. I will not, however, report to you. I will document every parking issue, every noise issue, and every disturbance, and I will contact the local police department to make sure a record is filed. I will also file complaints with local municipal court. And I will encourage all of my neighbors to do the same. I ask you now, Mr. Matessis, to withdraw your motion before the board. If not, I appeal to you, the board, and ask you to try as good a neighbor to us as we have been to you. Please vote no to the pilot program to light Keller Stadium. This is not a resolution in any fact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Greg Casco, 434 Everson Place. Mr. Kaplow, the letter that you were given last week was handed to the board from me, although I am not the author. I was willing to offer it up to the board to give to you for you to go over. A pilot program can be permanent with outside funding, as was the offer years ago when I sat in the auditorium of Edison Junior High School fighting nighttime lighting of Kaler Field for games. There was an outside group that came in and said they were willing to install those lights and pay for them. Mr. Aronson has already admitted that there will be an intrusion into neighboring homes and wants to be able to move forward with this pilot program to gauge the intrusion. That is unacceptable. Back in the fall, the Westfield football team used lights at Kaler Field. They were training or they were practicing for a nighttime game to be taking place in Linden, a state playoff game. It's my understanding that those lights were installed on a temporary basis so that they could get used to game experience under lights. Last week, some of those in support of the WSA's proposal approached this microphone to remind us that the proposal is for the children. Perhaps the paid trainers of the WSA, who are paid, and the parents of some of those players might donate some money towards the construction of a turf field. I, as a parent, have 2 daughters here at the high school. I pay a participation fee for them to participate in sports. From what I understand, it might offset some of the coaching expenses or other budgetary items. We were led to believe last week by several of the people that approached this microphone on behalf of WSA that they're all volunteers. As I just told you, they have trainers. They are paid. Another resident that I know personally that lives adjacent to the Memorial Pool Fields came up here and told us how she enjoys listening to the screaming of young girls running up and down the field playing soccer. I think we all do. The only difference is that's during the day. This proposal will have those children on the field during nighttime hours when we can expect, or we should expect, peace and quiet in our neighborhood. The WSA has not provided any professional engineering studies for sound or light spillage. This was confirmed in an email response from the WSA, Mr. Aronson, to me when I asked the question. They're merely going on the lighting unit specifications. Members of this board may have formulated an opinion after the WSA's demonstration of 1 generator with 1 light tower, but as far as we all know, with all due respect, none of you are experts in the field of engineering. Where lighting data, sound data, could have been gathered by a professional and submitted to this board on behalf of the WSA. The lights that the WSA are asking to erect at this field on a temporary basis, while your attorney has advised us that they will not be in violation of any land use ordinance, I direct him to the part of that land use ordinance that says 15 feet maximum. I believe these lights are going to be at 25 feet. I asked the WSA, have they formulated a contingency plan regarding the parking at Edison Intermediate School? We've been told that they will park over there. Obviously, Kaler Field doesn't have a parking lot. Take into consideration that the Westfield High School baseball team plays home games at Edison and uses that parking lot. All one has to do is take a ride down to Sid Fay Houlihan and look at the number of cars that line Lambert's Mill Road on both sides of the roadway. That cannot be done on Rawley Avenue. It's prohibited. Parking's prohibited, and the dropping off and picking up of the soccer players or lacrosse players is prohibited. I believe this is going to cause an issue. Mr. Franks of the WSA was caught off guard last week when he downplayed traffic accidents, pedestrian accidents, and other traffic-related issues in the vicinity of Sid Fay Houlihan Field or near Keeler Stadium. When he was questioned about it and where he got his info from, basically he admitted it was his opinion. He did not have the facts to back it up. The town has already told the WSA that town-owned fields are being used to the max by town-run sports coordinated through the Recreation Department. So they've come knocking on the front door of the Board of Education, our neighbors. I heard the word underutilized. Kaler Field is underutilized. Mr. Franks used this on numerous occasions. Kaler Field is being used to the max. It's underutilized if you consider lighting. We don't want that. When Kaler Field was turfed in 2005, many of the residents were concerned about lights being installed. That didn't come to fruition. We were against that. We were told at that time that the turf field would allow not only football, but a few soccer games, field hockey games, to be played on that field. In the past 10 years, as you now know, that field is used by not just Board of Education activities, but outside entities. This past weekend, there was a rugby match on Sunday. I have a question for the board. Was this a permitted event by the Board of Education? And if so, were there any user fees that were paid to the Board of Education to offset the use of that field? The Westfield Soccer Association is now looking to push the use of fields into the darkness or evening hours. I understand their need, I do. But by coming to this Board of Education, they've basically been told by the town, we can't help you anymore. In fact, I think some of their hours have been cut down at Sid Fay Houlihan. I, as a resident of that neighborhood of 22 years, do not want this in my neighborhood. My parents moved to this town in 1972. I grew up on Effingham Place. I went to Franklin School. I played on those fields. I went to Roosevelt. I played on those fields. I was on the cross-country and track teams. I ran in Tamaqua Park on those fields. At no time were those fields subpar, a danger. We've all been told by the WSA that our fields are not in great shape, maybe because they're overplayed on. That should be addressed before you consider putting lights at Kaler Field, which will definitely impact the quality of life of not only myself but my neighbors. Please be neighborly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again. Peter Franks, 518 Clark Street, Westfield, New Jersey. Trustee of the WSA, author of the proposal for the temporary light pilot program. So my name's been bantered around a lot tonight. It was last week. It was in the papers a couple of weeks ago as well. I think I was called the straw man, but we'll get there. I have a couple of comments. I haven't been asked a question yet, so I'm not going to answer questions per se, but I'll react to some of the things I've heard. But first of all, for you, the board, again, I appreciate your time and effort to listen to the proposal, to possibly vote on it, possibly accept it or deny it, to accept my email to Dana back in early February with the proposal, and you invited me to talk to the Facilities Committee and then to the full board and then to the public as well. We appreciate all of that, we truly do. The need is real, the need is now. We need to act on it as best we can, knowing that we'll be good stewards, good neighbors, and doing all that we can to help those in the neighborhood, those in the town and our community. So we've done a lot of research to mitigate the perceived intrusion on the neighborhood in an effort to relieve the current lack of viable practice facilities for both the youth club and the high school athlete. We've chosen the most quiet and most efficient portable generator that's available for rent, and actually the one that's actually made right now is the Wanko generator. To use the minimum amount of light required for a safe practice environment without being as intrusive as a full-blown permanent light solution with 80-foot towers. 4 units with adjustable lights, adjustable directions, and adjustable 4 bulbs per unit that can be turned on and off as needed. The limitation to just practices only. No games, no whistles, no buzzers. No parking on side streets. The parents will drop off in the parking lot. The children will walk across the street and go to practice. These children, by the way, are going to be 13 or 14 years or older. They're 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. I think they know how to cross the street. They're not little children. They're not screaming little children over at Memorial Field in the afternoon. They're young adults. Logistically, Keller's the only turf facility in town besides the fully utilized Houlihan Sid-Fay turf. Turf can be used in March, it can be used in the rain, it can be used after a rain event, and can provide practice sessions each night it is used. By the way, the fact, we'll start after the high school, which is about 7 o'clock, not 5 o'clock. It's a fact. Geographically, Keller definitely is in town. We can't find enough space at a decent hour to fulfill our needs or all the programs. We all gel into the same spring and fall situation. In any event, Keller's in town as opposed to sending our children to faraway places. If we could rent a field, which we don't have the ability to do, we've looked into it and continue to look into it. It's a community asset. It's used by the YMCA. It's used by Holy Trinity. It's used by Children's Specialized Hospital. It's used by the public. They walk around the track in the evening. Mr. Morris told me that the porta potty is there because the public needs a place, I guess. You get what I mean. In any event, I don't know if those users pay the high school user athletic fee or the field user fee that we all pay into as folks here in town do. Economically, it's a benefit to the Westfield High School programs at a zero cost basis, and it's a benefit to the WSA at a reasonable cost basis, both to the high school student and to the club soccer or lax player. Already pay user fees, and the high school players already use a athletic fee. And this field is not yet in the inventory after 7 o'clock at night when it becomes dark. The time has come to the end. The non-utility of the field and for its purpose. It's not used during the day except probably for local residents because the high school kids are in high school, the grade school kids are in school, and the soccer and lacrosse, baseball, whatever, they're all in school, right? Socially, the WSA has always been a model steward of the town and the Board of Ed facilities. We're sensitive to all the neighbors, and we try to be our best neighbor ourselves. I believe that Sandy and Mike Morris and Bruce Kaufman can attest to that. We've worked closely with the folks in the past to create relationships based on good stewardship and community acceptance. So, those are some of the facts. I'm not a defendant. You're not a prosecutor, and this is not a court. You've been railing on me a little bit, okay? That's a fact. I hope that you'll accept the proposal. I'll do my very, very, very best to prove that I am who I say I am and try to mitigate any real or perceived problems that exist over the next 10 weeks. It's a trial. We need to try. That's all it is. It's not a permanent lighting solution. We talked about that. The cost of that's very, very expensive. This is very, very cost acceptable to us as a program, and it's at no cost to the Board of Ed. And if there's some major problem and you want to cancel this program a day from now, a week from now, a month from now, there'll be no cost to you as well. We have it covered. I have contingency plans on that, so to answer that question from earlier. If you need me to stay up to answer any questions, I will. Otherwise, I'll sit down as a member of the community.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Franks? Members of the public have any questions for Mr. Franks? Go ahead. Just go back to the microphone, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Franks, if you took what I said personally, you felt I was railing against you personally.
Not at all.
Now, you repeatedly state that this, as a fact, will be a benefit to the Westfield High School programs. But the fact is, as we brought up in the last meeting, that daylight now occurs, the sunset does not occur till after 7 o'clock now. So for the next 10 weeks, if what you just said is the school's program ends before 7 o'clock, there is no discernible benefit to the school system through the Board of Ed at all. There's none, which means this shouldn't even be here before the board, other than the fact that he wants to
Hang on. Let's do one at a time.
Right? Oh, no, please, enlighten me. Yeah, go ahead. I just did.
I believe Sandy's going to walk up and help answer that question, but this proposal was made in February to start March 1st. Snow, Board of Ed decisions, timing. March 1st, it's very, very dark.
Go ahead, Sandy.
So there's a thing called dusk, which happens before the sun goes down. And safety is that you want to practice with lights during the dusk. And that does change daily at this time of the year because of the clouds. Okay? So some days at 6 o'clock it might be light enough to practice without the lights. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Taken aback that you're claiming dusk not occur.
No, dusk occurs. That's why we need the lights. So dusk usually happens before sundown, doesn't it?
I've actually been at the field.
So I just ask that we each just make our statements. You're more than welcome to go back to the mic, but let's just make statements and move on. Please address your comments to the board. We're not really engaging in a back and forth. Thank you.
Okay. So to put the lights on sometimes when it's raining, sometimes when the clouds are thick, we do need that time. And it's not necessarily when the sun goes down. It's the time before that, which would be dusk.
Thank you. Sure, you do have a line, but.
The question is directed at me. That's up to you.
Okay.
Let the next guy
Go ahead.
go. He's in line.
Hi, Greg Lemberg, 528 Grove Street. I just actually had I didn't have anything for you, Mr. Franks. I just wanted to clarify a couple things and ask a few additional questions. So, Mr. Caplow, I believe you stated it was 18.04G of the town land use ordinance that is what you were citing as making this proposal non-violative. Is that correct?
No, I'm saying that this 4-page letter that constantly refers to a conditional use seems incorrect to me and inaccurate. I don't think it's a conditional use that's being proposed. I don't think the existing use at Kaler Stadium is a conditional use, and I don't think the lighting structure constitutes a conditional use. So most of this letter does not demonstrate to me at all that there's a violation of the land use ordinance. What I said is also that because there's nothing about the proposal that necessitates the use of public funds, it doesn't appear as a threshold matter that the planning board would even have jurisdiction over this proposal. Those were, I think, my major points.
Okay, so there's no piece of the land use ordinance that you're specifically referring to in support of your opinion? Is that, I'm just trying to clarify it. I'm not going to challenge you on it.
Actually, I looked at the land use ordinance provisions that were cited in the letter that Mr. Casco referred to, and they all deal with the requirement to file a conditional use proposal with the planning board or board of adjustment, and talks about the applicability of the conditional use ordinance, and I find that those are not applicable.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. One other point of clarification, the field is used during the day in case anyone, I think Mr. Franks indicated that it's only used after school. It is used for the Edison School gym programs, So the field, when, weather permitting, is in use during the day as well as in the after-school, and now with this proposal, it would be even after dark. Another point that one of the other residents made was that there really are inadequate barriers around the field. Our home is one that didn't fare so well, and the plantings that were installed several years ago did not survive, as I think is the case in general. And I guess my final point of, clarification or just something to highlight from my perspective, in terms of judging the success or failure of the program, my concern as a resident is that it will be highly subjective. Sound, light, safety, any other disturbances in the neighborhood that occur, during this time period are going to be highly subjective. If I hear noise from the field when I'm sitting at my dining room table having dinner, that's a disturbance to me. To a board member or anyone else who might come and listen, they might say, oh, well, you can hardly hear it. So how does that very soft metric be made less soft? So if I call and complain on the number that's been provided, because I'm hearing noise on the field and it's after dark and that disturbs me, is that adequate? Is that not adequate? Would someone else judge that it's just noise and it's not a big deal? If I have to turn the volume up on my television when I'm sitting in my den watching television a couple of notches so that I can hear over the sounds from the field, is that a substantial intrusion or not? To me it is. So that's my concern. If a few people drop their kids on Rahway Avenue instead of using the Edison parking lot, is that a disturbance? Is it a violation? Is it a safety issue? Some might argue, oh, it's only a couple of people. Others might say, any is too many. So that would be just a concern and a consideration that I would raise if the proposal is approved, that harder metrics than that are going to have to be put in place, because otherwise it's going to become, a highly subjective and possibly not very productive discussion post these meetings.
Thank you.
Good evening, Serena Vash, 104 Golf Edge Drive in Westfield. I don't live by Keller Field. I spoke last week on behalf of the Westfield Soccer Association, on behalf of myself as a coach and my children, and I spoke very passionately because I felt very passionately about the issue. If I lived behind Keller Field, I would feel very passionately about that issue. And I would have come up here and I would have spoken about that. And that's the issue and the problem that we have, is that everybody here is absolutely right. We have woeful little space soccer fields for our children, and those fields are in our neighbors' yards. Nobody is dismissing anybody's concerns. I don't think anybody any of our neighbors were trying to dismiss our concerns, and we certainly were not trying to dismiss theirs. I do believe we need to go forward with the pilot, but I also believe there needs to be a real assessment of whether or not it works. And when I sat here last week and I listened to everything the Westfield Soccer Association said, I listened to everything our neighbors said, and things got more and more and more afield, if you will, of the issues. And I didn't think, oh, that's silly, why are they raising that? I thought, my neighbors are in distress because the field is in their yard. The Westfield Soccer Association is in distress because there's not enough fields. This is not a Westfield Soccer Association issue, and it is not a Keller Field neighbor issue. It is a community issue, and we need a community solution. I would like to see us implement this pilot program, and I would like to see a real assessment, and to the extent we can fix any of the issues that have been lingering for our neighbors, whether they are kids who are behind Lincoln School or whether they are children who are using the loudspeakers who shouldn't be using the loudspeakers singing "Who Let the Dogs Out." That's unacceptable. To the extent I personally can help, I will do so through the Westfield Soccer Association. I will do so by availing myself to the board, and I will do so by availing myself to my neighbors. This is a community problem. We need a community solution. This is the one that's on the table. Let's see if it works. Let's give it a real assessment, and let's come up with a community solution that works for everybody.
Thank you.
Scott Roger, Washington Street. I'm not trying to turn this into a personal issue. I respect Mr. Frank's commitment to the Westfield Soccer Association for the past 19 years. I feel I'm allowed somewhat to be a bit defensive about the home I've worked so hard to afford and maintain for the past 20 years. And I'm sure everyone else feels the same way. As I said, I'm not trying to turn this into a personal issue. All I'm trying to do is point out fact. When people make claims, I know they make passionate claims, sometimes fact tends to fall out. Mr. Franks basically insinuated moments ago that if it wasn't for the opposition, this would have been voted on, it would have been implemented already. So that's why the lights and the carryover from dark and now sunset is after 7 o'clock. But the truth is, there was snow on the field until last week. No one was using the field last week. Whether we didn't oppose it, whether they had the generators, they'd be sitting on the side of the snowbanks waiting for thaw, which really hasn't fully happened yet. Ms. Dusk was exceptionally articulate and concerned, and I found that wonderful. And she brought out the fact that the Westfield Soccer Association is in distress because of this need, and that there was not enough fields. But the truth is, there is enough fields in Westfield. There are not enough turfed fields for their access. You know, this is something that should be resolved, or should have been resolved, in a long-term fundraiser to turf other fields. Earlier this evening, you were discussing the budget for the Board of Education. We all know full well what the state has done to schools and to municipalities with the cutbacks in aid and forced so much more of a burden back on the school systems and the municipalities. I spoke to Bruce Kaufman this morning from the Recreation Department. If the town had the money, they would turf another field, but they don't have it. And maybe it's time for a grassroots fundraiser where we get together as neighbors and we try to solicit funds to turf another field so the Soccer Association has access to that field, not in competition with the high school, but on their own from 3 till dark, where they won't need to light it because they'll have it for hours. And then maybe we push to get a second turf field. But that's not what's being offered here. This is the simplest Band-Aid solution, and everyone keeps saying the same thing. Oh, it's a little sacrifice. But I keep pointing out, it's not your sacrifice that you're volunteering. It's ours. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Laura Vasilowicz. I live at 715 Rawway Avenue, which makes me literally a neighbor of the field, so I obviously have a lot of stake in this. I think it was Serena. Is that your name? Thank you for coming up both last week and this week. I think probably of everyone, no offense to everyone else, but of everyone who's spoken on behalf of the WSA, I think she's been very articulate, and I especially appreciated your comments about your team last week, and I do feel very passionately about that. I've played soccer my whole life, and I must say that even as a neighbor, I'm conflicted because, because as been said, this is a community issue, and I feel for the soccer players, but I also feel for the other ordinary children, such as my 20-month-old daughter, who's going to have to go to sleep at 7:30 and listen to the noise on the field. And we are 20 feet from the locker room, and I assure you, I hear every conversation that happens inside the locker room, directly adjacent to the locker room. I hear the practices, and they're loud, and during the day and in the evening, it's one thing, but late into the evening, I'm concerned that they would continue to be that loud. I don't know for sure. Maybe they won't be, but I'm concerned about it. So I also would argue in favor of a little bit more concreteness around what is a successful pilot program. if you guys want to come to dinner, I won't cook because I'm a horrible cook, but you're welcome to come hang out at my house for an hour or two, listen to the noise, set up a monitor to monitor the sound decibels in my backyard, whatever you need to do to make sure that this is an appropriate solution for the problem that is facing our community. And thank you for considering both of the options.
Thank you.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Chris Collins. I live at 453 Everson Place, right across from the field. I don't really have any prepared statement. I just want to remind the board that I spoke last week, that I was there for the demonstration. What brought me over was seeing the light, hearing the noise, and it brought me over to the field, and I met the board president. And I appreciate the fact that you spent some time with me at that, during that demonstration to talk. We both witnessed the hoisting of the light masts, and we both recognize that we can hear that. There are 4 light masts. I'm going to hear those go up and down many times every day for 10 weeks. That's not temporary. 10 weeks is not temporary, not when you have small kids, and I do. I heard some things, last week about the site being underutilized, and I think I heard tonight it's not. I just want to walk you through my day yesterday. I happened to be home. Not sure if you know it, but the garbage truck shows up at 6:30 at the Lincoln School to empty out the garbage. I'm up. The schools, both Lincoln, the little kids do get to go out, and if they do 2 laps, I think they get a popsicle. I know that because my kids got to do it, and I love seeing it. I love hearing it. That's one of the best things about being in the neighborhood is hearing, what goes on. But, that can get tiring at a point. At 10 o'clock, the gym classes go out, and that's great. I mean, I love watching the kids on the track. I'm a runner. I like to see it. And I can see it. I can just stand in my backyard and look straight into the field. Then around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, that's when the practices commence. And, unfortunately, sometimes they crank up the PA. I haven't complained. I guess it's part of living by the stadium. I accept that. So, last night, the Westfield track and field, they were out there. It got dark around 7:30. I think they were gone by 7:40. And the neighborhood went quiet. It went peaceful. And it was nice. I sat outside for a little bit, and then I went inside and I went to bed. And at 6:30, the dump truck showed up. I can't imagine at 7:30, that's when those, clickety-clack, clickety-clack, we're going to raise these light masts and do it for another 2 hours. That's 2 hours of my life. It's 2 hours of everybody who borders the field. That's another 2 hours of what I've just described. It's been described as a non-nuisance solution. Clickety-clack, clickety-clack. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear it at 7:40. I don't want to hear it at 9:40 when my kids have been asleep for maybe an hour. Non-nuisance. Like I said, I can see right into that field. We're talking about a construction-style light. It's 28 feet tall. It's got 4 big reflectors on it that, I think the Westfield Soccer Association said, you just, wrangle it the way you want it. I don't know if you guys felt that wind today. They're going to be wrangling that thing every day. And I just heard them say, yeah, there's some light spill and there's going to be some noise. When we did that demonstration, or when the board did that demonstration that I was lucky enough to come upon, there was one light, and it was in the most secluded area. I mean, it was right behind Lincoln School. I think I gave you guys a picture last week. It was between 2 cargo things that we use for storage, behind the Lincoln School, and it was blocked by the concession stand. I mean, it was so non-representational of the neighborhood, it's bothersome. I've heard that we're going to chain these construction-style generators to the bleachers so they don't get stolen. I don't think they'll get stolen. But I know that if you put a generator under a bleacher, that bleacher is going to amplify the sound. Now, I'm not an engineer, neither are you guys. But common sense says that's going to happen. I live behind that bleacher. And then, you know, the idea, I touched on it, that this is temporary. I like, you know, let's think about 10 weeks. That's practically a college semester, at least it was where I went to school. It's practically a quarter of my taxes. 10 weeks is a long time. You know, I sat here tonight through a lot of budget discussion and how we can, you know, increase the wireless networks in the schools so the kids can benefit from the learning. And you guys are putting a lot of time and a lot of energy towards making the right decisions and doing the right thing. I want you to do the same thing for the lights. You know, the fact that we haven't measured anything. How do we get to this point and we haven't measured anything? How do we get to this point? I mean, I printed a picture, you know, in the demonstrations tonight for the wireless, there was great visual information provided. I tried to do the same thing. I printed one simple picture that showed you what I see, just a naked field. There's nothing. You guys have trees that were planted and died. One side doesn't have that. One side doesn't have anything. The site is just, it's wrong for lights. The line of sight problem, if a neighbor wanted to put one of those things up and not run it, it would be ugly. The picture that I gave you guys the other day with these, you know, these construction trailers that we use for storage. I mean, we're starting to treat Keeler Field like a junkyard. You know, recently, if you've been under the bleachers, it's a garbage zone. If you've been, one of my neighbors testified that behind the concession stand, you know, it's a mess. It is. And we're talking about putting more of this stuff in our neighborhood. It's unsightly. It's going to spill light. It's probably going to be loud. Probably. I don't know. Maybe it's not, but we haven't measured anything. So I would like to see the board, I would love to see the board recognize all this, not the legal stuff. I mean, I've got people texting me, read this, read that, look at this part of the land use. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a parent. I want to raise my kids. I want them to get a decent amount of sleep so they can come here and benefit from that wireless network. So I want the board to hear the neighborhood and to understand that it's a lot to ask a small group of people to take. And we have taken a lot over the years. And, you know, I said the other day, you know, I call the police routinely when things are out of whack. You know, the kids are in the Lincoln Park throwing rocks. Cars are going out the wrong way from the school. You know, sitting there idling. I call the police. That's what I do as a resident. You know, to ask me to call the soccer association, they can't police themselves. That's unrealistic. And there needs to be, you know, if this does actually go through, there needs to be a third party that you know, residents can reach out to and say, this is going on. I fully expect that if it does go through, that, you know, greater documentation than the simple photographs that I handed you will take place. And, you know, as I saw tonight, you guys have a lot on your plate. You know, the neighborhood has made it clear. And over the years, I've only lived here for 16 years. I think this goes back a lot longer than me. I've heard 20 years. It's written in a lot of the land use that it's clear that this town doesn't want lights in neighborhoods. If I were lucky enough to put a tennis court in my yard, I couldn't put lights on it. The overriding ideals that Westfield has put in its own
land use or whatever you want to call it, is anti-lighting. Now, there have to be other solutions. I've gone over to the Armory the other day. The Armory is a great space. I witnessed 8 girls playing soccer on a huge field. I'm going to send you all a picture of that tomorrow. I should have sent it today. There are other options. Just because, this is the easy solution, that's not acceptable. Thank you very much for hearing what's on my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the Armory turfed?
It's got temporary turf. They roll out every winter.
Anyone else from the public want to make a comment? All right, I just want to, I'll go to the board in a second. I didn't want to interrupt anyone while they were speaking, but I did want to correct a couple of statements that were made because they were attributed to the Board of Ed as statements having been made by me. The first is that that I or the board would have made a statement that, quote, sacrifice has to be made. And somehow, as a result of that conclusion, we're coming to this particular neighborhood. I never made that statement. This board, to my knowledge, has never made that statement. And I don't think any one of us looks at it that way. Secondly, that there was a comment that we didn't ask the school to stop earlier. We aren't willing to share the sacrifice. In fact, I did ask that question of Sandy and Peter, whether either one of those programs could cut time out of the proposal and still have it be viable. And their view was that if they were going to do this pilot, they wanted to put in the amount of time that they thought was appropriate for their programs, and they chose not to cut it back, and we'll have to consider that. I did hear tonight that the Westfield Soccer Association is pushing and looking at not having to use and not requesting Friday nights. I hope that's something they push hard on. I think similarly, I accept the fact that this has been delayed, but perhaps we don't need 10 weeks, and I hope that's something they look hard at if this is approved. It was noted that there was no venue to take complaints. We could debate that. I do think, in fairness, I've said where we will put a number and how that will work, and we'll be specific, and we'll be even more specific, because clearly there's a concern, but the pilot hasn't been approved, and no, we didn't put on the website a way to register complaints at this point. And then finally, just the notion that we're not listening, and somehow having a one light and one generator show up was somehow indicative of the fact that we're not listening. I take the opposite view. I actually think that was indicative of the fact that we are listening, because that one generator was not in any way intended to be a proxy for 4 generators or really anything else, except that it was responsive to multiple comments that, for example, you can't believe what the manufacturer specs say. We know that that particular generator is equivalent to the sound of 2 home generators. That was worthy of looking at. A comment that we know that generator will fill the air with diesel fuel smell. That was worth looking at. It wasn't intended to have us go look at one generator and say 4 is going to be great. In fact, to the opposite, we've said, I don't know what 4 is going to do, but maybe we can find out if we have 4. It was done to do the opposite, to be responsive to comments we got, and to see if they were accurate in our view. Having said all that, my personal opinion is that this is, in my mind, information gathering, and that's it. It may be an intrusion in that neighborhood. That isn't to say we're asking you to sacrifice for a permanent program. It's to say that if there is in fact an intrusion, I want to hear it, I want to see it, I want to know it, and it is subjective, and I am sensitive to the fact that that's your neighborhood, it's not my neighborhood in terms of where I live, but it is everybody's neighborhood in terms of the community that is there, the fact that the school is there, the fact that Edison uses it, the high school uses it, kids all over town use that particular field. And I believe that this board, from the comments I've heard, and knowing the people on this board, that we are interested in getting the facts and gathering the data and actually looking at them, analyzing them, and then forming a conclusion on what this pilot did and what it became, and not looking at this as the next step in a path that we know the answer to, or the next step in a path of something we desire, because it's not that at all. If anyone else has comments, you're welcome to make them.
I just had a quick question for Peter, if you don't mind. What will you plan on doing with the information if the pilot does work, if we find it successful? What were your hopes, you know, as far as...
Peter, can you go to the microphone?
Sorry.
I would add, though, that it's not really your purview to decide what this pilot is going to result in.
Okay, I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
I'm just curious, you know, it's a pilot, so I know I wanted to address the concerns of the residents as the question that kept coming up, what is this pilot for?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that question's looming out there. So I'm just curious, once you have the information from the pilot, if it does work and it is successful,
Mm-hmm.
moving forward, what would be the hopes of the WSA?
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking for the WSA, I think what we want to try to find out is, the first answer is there's a definite need for more space, more nighttime space with lights on a synthetic surface. That's the only surface in town that's available. So that's why we brought the proposal. Do we have permission? Can we do this? It'll help the school, it'll help us. And it will test the time, if it does work, with whatever parameters are put in place by the Board of Ed to see if it's viable, and it did work or didn't work. That's a great learning in itself. What I had said last week, and I said I think in the facilities meeting, it might be, I hope it to be, a catalyst for the entire town to realize that we do need to do something more than just put temporary lights each year or each 10-week period at Keller, which is when there are other viable spaces to put in a permanent facility. There are a couple of areas in town that are viable for that are less intrusive. The tennis courts over to Mockford School are already lit up. There seems to be no complaint over there. Houlihan Sid Fay, there's been no complaint. There's space over there that could be used. Our hope is that it's a catalyst to get a full-time, permanently lit, 365, 12 hours a day, field in place in town. And somebody had mentioned, the grassroots, some private donation, some county donation, some town donation. We don't think that's going to happen at Keller. I don't think that the high school wants Friday Night Lights football, the 80-foot towers. It's not going to happen. In my opinion, that's my opinion. What you want to do with it is up to you. It's your field, not mine.
That helps,
Is that
thank you.
good?
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Anyone before we close this out? Go ahead, Brian.
We all know the board's been considering lighting Kaler for about a decade, maybe a little longer, a little shorter. And it's in various capacities, temporary, permanent, et cetera. And I came to last week's meeting with the intention of giving the trial run a shot. I'm no longer convinced that's in our best interest. And I know we're all elected at large and don't represent specific neighborhoods, but as the closest board member to the field, nobody's representing the Kaler neighbors. Even if I cast the lone dissenting vote tonight, these residents deserve to be heard and their voices represented. We need to be better neighbors.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Rich, I would just sum up what Mrs. Bash said, because I think for me, this is what this comes down to, is that, this is a community issue. We need a community solution. Other things have been tried. High school field, attempting the bond referendum to turf, did not work. I think this deserves a chance.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, Dana?
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
No.
Chris Langhart,
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes, and I want to make one comment, and that is that I do agree that this is a community issue, and I have worked quietly, but for 5-8 years, although not in an official capacity anymore with the town government, to try to figure out how we can all align to give opportunity to everybody in the town for a field that is worthy of the size that athletes need and also protected from neighborhood intrusion.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone who came tonight to speak on this topic and for your comments. Thank you, board members, for your comments and going through this process. There are no other items under facilities. Brings us to long-range planning. Ginny?
Nope, no report.
Thank you. Policies, Lucy?
Yes. I would like to have the board consider and approve for first reading the following policies as per attached. 1310, Employment of Business Administrator Board Secretary, and 1581, Victim of Domestic or Silent Violence Leave. Can I have a second? Sexual Violence Leave? Did I say?
Second.
Thanks, Gretchen. Lost my train of thought. Can we vote on that, Dana?
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Chris Langhart,
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
And I'd also like to have the board consider approving for second reading the following policy, 1100, District Organizational Chart, Administration. Can I have a second?
Second.
Brendan, thanks. Any questions on that? It was attached and given in our packets? Okay, Dana?
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Chris Langhart,
Yes.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
And I'd also like to have the board consider and approve guidelines and procedures for the 2015-2016 student activity fee per policy 2436 student activity fee. You had an attachment number 5. Yes, Ginny?
Second.
Oh, thank you, Ginny. You beat me to it. Okay. Dana?
I just want, just one quick comment, just confirming that it's not going up, it's the same.
It's the same.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Chris Langhart,
Yes.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
And I'd also like to have the board consider and approve the board affirming the superintendent's decision on HIB incidents 15 R04 for the reasons set therefore within.
I think we had an addendum to that.
We did? That deleted that one.
Wait, what happened?
I
No.
thought that was an addition.
It's an
It is
addition.
an addition.
So that
For-
is one.
That's number 5.
Right,
You
that
can
was
do-
correct.
Is that correct? I apologize.
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry.
okay. Okay.
This
My
one's
bad.
all right.
Number 5.
I'll just, okay, so just if I could have the board consider and approve the affirming the superintendent's decision on HIB incidents 15R04 for the reasons set forth herein. Second, Ginny?
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Chris Langhart.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
Okay, and now I would like to have the board consider and approve reversing the superintendent's decision on HIB incident 15E05 for the reasons set forth therein. Ginny?
Second.
Thank
Rich
you.
Matesic,
I'm going to abstain.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Chris Langhart,
I abstain.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
No.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
Anything else, Lucy?
No, that's it, Rich, thanks.
Thank you. Curriculum, instruction, and programs, Gretchen?
I'd like to ask the board to consider curriculum or SIP motions 1 and 2. Can I have a second? Ginny, thank you. The first is for the district field trips that were attached to the agenda, and then the second is for the second reading of the curricula that we discussed a couple weeks ago. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. Seeing none, Dana?
Rich Matesic.
Yes.
Lucy Biegler.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Chris Langhardt.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Olid.
Yes.
Peggy Oster.
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
I don't, nothing further. Although I will just note that our April 2nd curriculum committee meeting is now a day when school no longer is happening. So we'll reschedule and we will get that a new date on the calendar. Thanks.
Okay, done.
Done.
In Mark's absence, I'd ask the board to consider finance motions number 1 through 12. A second, Ginny, thank you. I would call the board's attention.
Rich, I think you should do the budget ones separate. So 1, 2, and 3, I think you should do separate, and then you
Okay.
can do 4 through 12 together.
Fine, I'll withdraw that motion and ask the board to consider.
I'll withdraw my second.
Thank you, and ask the board to consider finance motions 1 through 3 regarding
I
the
think-
budget.
Oh, okay.
Ginny, thank you.
Second.
Any questions or comments on that? Go ahead.
Rich Matesic.
Yes.
Lucy Biegler.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Chris Langhardt.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Olid.
Yes.
Peggy Oster.
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
All right, with that, I'd ask the board to approve finance motions 4 through 12. Have a second? Ginny, thank you. I would like to comment on motions 11 and 12 to accept a gift of $3,797.40 from an anonymous donor to the Wilson School to purchase 6 iPad Air 2 tablets and 6 cases. Thank you very much. And to accept the gift of weights, a weight bench, sanders, and drills valued at $350 from Mr. and Mrs. Hannes to be used at Roosevelt Intermediate School. We thank you very much. Any comments or questions on those? All right, Dana?
Rich Matesic.
Yes.
Lucy Biegler.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Chris Langhardt.
Yes.
Ginny Lights.
Yes.
Gretchen Olid.
Yes.
Peggy Oster.
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
All right, nothing else in finance. Legislation, Brendan?
No report. There are a lot of issues that we need to start discussing. If everybody could just stick around after the meeting for a minute and try and pick down some dates, we'll get going after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Technology Committee report, Mitch?
Nope. Heard it tonight.
Wonderful. I'd ask the board to note the notes for the record. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Any liaison reports? All right, I would then again recognize the public for questions and comments on any topic. Please just state your name and address, and please speak closely to the microphone.
Yes, this is Eva O'Neill and Mark O'Neill. We live at 56 Manitou Circle. We addressed you at the last board meeting regarding the busing. We just want an update on the busing for kindergarten, sorry.
It's something we're still looking at. We don't have an answer yet. We are still looking at consolidating some of the kindergarten runs as well as some of the other runs that we have in the district, but we haven't made any decisions at this point.
Okay, how do we get information?
We will notify, you have an incoming kindergarten student, I assume?
Okay, yeah.
So we'll notify the incoming kindergarten parents of what we're going to do with busing.
Okay, I mean, so there's nothing, I don't know how to sway you one way or the other, or like, you know, I don't know. So that's what I'm saying. And we waited 3 hours just to find out about it. And it's
What about, I mean, who's, just so I'm...
You could call the transportation department and ask questions, and, I mean, we did hear you at the last board meeting, or
Right.
one of the board meetings, so we did hear you, and we'll
Yeah.
take that into consideration, but you can also call the business office or the transportation department.
I did, I forget the woman that I spoke to, I did call her before the last meeting to find out numbers of kids that may be using it next year, and she didn't seem to have any numbers, and she told me, the board just tells me, or not, maybe not the board, she goes, I'm just told what to do.
Right, because we're still looking at the numbers, and then we will notify the parents when we decide what we're going to do with transportation. We'll send you a letter and tell you
Right.
what we're going to do. But we did hear you, and that's going to be part of our consideration when we figure out how we're going to transport and where we're going to consolidate.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I'm just, so I can understand, I'm not trying to influence anything, but, so who would do the investigation? Like, who goes and tries to find out if there's easily available smaller buses? How many kids from this area? Like, who's going to do that?
It's
Is it
my
you?
office, that's done in the business office. So that's what we're looking at currently, is how many kids are riding. We have 3 buses currently transporting, and we have somewhere around 35 to 39 kids riding the buses. And those 3 buses cost us $86,000 a year. So that's what we're looking at, if we can consolidate to save some money there, because we did make a reduction in the transportation budget for next year. But that would come out of my office.
Well, do you know how many kids will be using it next year?
That's what we're still working on. That's why I don't have a definite answer for you right now.
Okay, I mean, I understand, if we end up here in a month and you just eliminate 2 buses, I mean, you're going to complete the work that you have to do? I mean, it's going to get done? I mean, I don't want to get here in a month and find out that you're not making an informed decision because you don't get whatever you need to get done. It seems like you have a lot of stuff to do. And maybe this isn't the highest priority in the thing. I'm sure everything gets its equal share. I'm just saying I could see a month from now, we get here and because you don't have all the information that you need, you're not able to make the decision that you should make.
So
Well-
what's the timeline? What
Well,
do you anticipate?
I can't give an exact timeline, but I had to get through tonight first. And now what we'll start doing is looking closer, but we have been looking at it already. We do have to go out to bid if we're changing the routes, so we have to have time to do that. We also want to notify the parents, so we're well aware you need to know that. So it will be something, I can't give you a date, but
No,
it's
I-
something
I-
we're working
right.
on. And we will have the information, and to the best that we can get. I mean, we don't really know, people tell us they're interested, we don't really know the exact numbers of people that are going to ride buses. So we go with the best information we have at the time.
Okay, because we have to take it on faith, since there isn't really someone we can call and say, how's the progress going?
Well, you can call
apparently.
my office, why don't you call
Okay.
me?
All right, that's good.
Call the business office and ask for me, and I'll be happy to talk to you and update you, okay?
I appreciate that, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public with questions or comments on any topic? All right, seeing no one come to the podium, Dana or Peg, do we have any need for a private session?
We do not.
All right, then
Move to adjourn.
I'd move to adjourn. Second? Ginny, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned.